everyone. Samia Khan here and Ron Hoon.
Hello, everybody.
Your Friday edition of News Now, Friday, December 18th. I feel like even though the official last day of the year is December 31st, somehow today feels like it.
Really?
President Obama is giving his end of the year address today.
When is that happening, by the way?
It is, I believe, 11:50, I want to say, our time.
Right.
Obama,
Meaning
obviously,
a quarter to
always late.
1.
But I mean, if there's something about it where it's like it kind of feels like the last day of school before everyone leaves for winter break. Except I will still have to work during winter break.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm working all of next week.
Well, okay, that's fine.
Do you know what I mean, though? That feeling in the air. It's like free shipping day when it comes to shopping. Got to get those last minute gifts. You have a week left before Christmas.
So now you guys, your winters in Fresno were, where do you want me, over here?
Yeah, because you're getting cut off otherwise.
Your winters in Fresno were sort of like this, weren't they? So this super cold snap we're having isn't bugging you too much?
I hate it.
Really?
Why do you think I don't live in Fresno?
Well, I don't know.
No, that's not why. But I don't like the cold.
Oh,
you have to understand that having lived in Los Angeles for a decade, I was used to no seasons.
I know.
I was just used to the temperatures fluctuating between 65 and 85 degrees the whole year.
Why can't they get that figured out over in LA?
No, I like it.
No, they need some seasons.
I like it. And you know what? Last winter was my first winter here.
Yes.
And last winter tricked me. Because we did have a couple cold days like this last winter, but then it was suddenly like unseasonably warm, and I was into that.
Yeah. Well, we have, it seems to me about every third year, we have a winter that's cold enough that it kills all your trees and all your plants and all that kind of thing. People have these ficus trees. These are gigantic trees, and it just kills them. I mean, you have to like cut them down and prune them back and start with a stump and everything.
Trees are getting murdered.
Trees get murdered around
by
here.
the weather.
SK. So,
how can you support something like that?
I don't know. I know we're going to start with the top 5 in a moment. But since I haven't had a chance to work with you in a while, I just wanted to tell you one very quick story, which is this.
What's that?
I had a dream about Fresno.
I wish you started that more Martin Luther King-esque.
I have, but in this case I had, like about a week ago, I think you were gone.
Okay.
I have never dreamt about Fresno, California, I can guarantee you, in my entire life. And somehow I have this dream, and I'm driving down the street, and it turned out the main street, it curves, and you come into the main street, and there's like 4 blocks worth of stores, and then there's a Kmart on the left, just as you leave town and head back out toward the freeway. Now, is that the way Fresno actually is?
There was one Kmart in town. Okay. Growing up, I remember I would go there for ices.
Yeah, sure.
The red ones.
Is it right on the left as you're leaving town?
They shut down.
That would freak me out.
They shut down decades ago.
I'm saying, was it?
The Kmart?
Yeah. You don't remember?
Well, it was kind of near a freeway.
I feel very uncomfortable anyway that I had a dream about Fresno.
Well, it's fitting that you brought up Fresno because I was going to bring up Fresno anyways. I love this story so much I almost put it in the top 5.
Okay.
But I was like, no, I can't just put it in the top 5 because I'm from Fresno. But since you brought up Fresno today,
so it would be number 6.
Only right to share the story early, even though it's one of those happy stories and like to save happy stories for the end.
Of course you do.
This was huge news. You could say it was someone's good heart, Christmas spirit, or just being a good person. This family lost $32,000, and apparently
in cash.
in cash. They were supposed to deposit it at the bank.
Okay.
And this waiter or server or someone who works at the Applebee's where they were dining at found it, called police. And the family was reunited with the money. They were panicking because it was the money from their, what was it? I have the link here.
Which, of course, the first thing I say is,
why carry
who
cash?
carries $32,000 in cash in a big bag?
But their dad, her father had sent it from Mexico from his business. I don't know.
Okay.
Let me find this. It explains it all in the Fresno Bee.
Okay.
Holiday joy. Fresno waiter returns family's lost $32,000.
That actually is an unbelievable story. That's cool.
So, yeah. So, basically, her father owns a restaurant in San Jose.
Okay.
And also the money comes from proceeds from a rental house.
Okay.
It's not from Mexico. Sorry. Now they can go on vacation in Mexico.
To Puerto
because they
Vallarta.
have
Yeah.
their $32,000 back.
Okay. So here's the other
They
part
have
of it.
pictures of the cash.
Okay.
What?
It says the money was lost on.
I just want to show I can't believe they have pictures of the cash. Fresno PD actually released this photo.
Look at that, all spread out. I mean, they put some effort into that photo. They were thinking,
Look at that.
let's make it go social.
Yeah, it's very Instagrammable. I wonder how many likes the Fresno PD got on that one.
I wonder. But anyway, so they went to the bank, and then they were told that there were no safe deposit boxes available for the cash. So they ran some errands and then ran over to Applebee's, which is, I mean, who's not going to do something like that?
Right.
You want to grab a bite, Applebee's is awesome. And they thought it had been left behind in the bank, but when they called, the bank said no. And then they got panicked. And then, about the same time, police get a call from the Applebee's where the server says, hey, you guys, I have found the biggest stash of cash you'd ever not believe. That's amazing.
Yeah, in my hometown of Fresno, as soon as I read Applebee's, I knew exactly which Applebee's they were talking about.
Is that
too.
right?
Yeah, I imagined that it was the Applebee's that I drive by very frequently down only a few miles from my home.
Is it sort of down by campus, Fresno State? No?
It's north of campus. It's actually on the intersection of Cedar and Herndon. And Cedar and Shaw is where Fresno State is. So it's about 3 miles north of Fresno State.
You guys have a Herndon?
4 miles.
You have a road named Herndon?
Herndon's like the main road. I've lived near Herndon for a really long time.
Well, here's
in
what's
multiple
crazy
houses.
about that. We, the guy in Wenatchee, which remember, Samia and I, our very first connection is that our two airports are intertwined forever because in Wenatchee, my hometown, it's EAT, E-A-T, and what is Fresno's?
F-A-T. So when
fat.
you eat...
You eat, you get fat. So eat fat are our two airports. And the airport was named after a guy named Herndon and a guy named Pangborn. And you have a road named Herndon that sort of is probably not too far from your airport.
No, it's actually very far from the airport. Incredibly far from our airport.
So much
It's
for
like
that
North
story.
Fresno.
All right,
North Fresno and North Clovis.
Anyway, all right, so the House passes a spending bill.
Yes, so let's get back to our headlines now. So the
Okay.
House passes the spending bill. This was breaking news. We were getting AP alerts this morning just before 8 a.m. our time. They narrowly passed it. I believe it was 116 and 113.
Yeah.
And we got some video of the vote. And I know that the Senate right now, oh my gosh, they're speaking right now because the Senate was voting on it.
Oh, gosh.
Should we listen
We better
in?
listen for a second.
On education, on transportation, and so many issues. Just like we saw again just a few minutes ago, with passage of a significant cybersecurity measure, long overdue improvements to the visa waiver program, tax relief for families and small businesses, and other important matters. I thank the chairman of the Finance Committee the other day for his impressive work on the tax side of that legislation. Senator Hatch has been an invaluable ally working those issues. Passage of a visa waiver reform and cybersecurity legislation are both notable accomplishments for our country, and neither would have been possible without the continued hard work of the Chairman of Homeland Security, Ron Johnson. I'd like to express sincere gratitude to the Chairman of Intelligence, Richard Burr, for his work on cybersecurity, too. I know there are many others to thank, the Chairman of the Appropriations Committee and the leadership and members of all the committees who worked many long hours recently in particular. So I apologize to those I haven't been able to mention, but I want to thank them and to say simply this. I wish you Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays to everyone. See you in 2016. Rest up, because we've still got a lot of work to do for the American people.
Senator from Iowa.
I thank my colleagues for their commendation to the 150th anniversary of the University of Iowa College of Law. This makes it the first law school west of the Mississippi to reach that milestone. In the past 150 years, the College of Law has served the people of Iowa, the nation, and the world. And I'm pleased, along with my colleague, Senator Ernst, that resolution congratulates the College of Law on its accomplishments. I've been honored to attend some of the events celebrating Iowa law this past year, and the law school should be proud of its vast history of achievements. It's the oldest law school west of the Mississippi River and has produced generations of attorneys that have been dedicated to improving and enhancing the practice of law in Iowa and throughout the nation. Currently, Iowa law has over 10,000 living alumni that practice in Iowa and around the world. Iowa was the first state to admit a woman to the practice of law. Iowa law followed this tradition when in 1873 it graduated what is believed to be the first female law student in the United States, Mary Hickey. Iowa's law second female law student, Mary Haddock, was the first woman admitted to the practice of law before the district and circuit courts of the United States. Iowa law was one of the first law schools to grant a degree to an African American student when Alexander Clark Jr. graduated in 1879, decades before other law schools allowed the enrollment of non-white students. Iowa law has always been at the forefront of the legal field, particularly when it comes to diversity. Iowa law has consistently ranked as one of the top 10 public law schools in the country and is currently ranked the 22nd best law school in the nation. Throughout the years, Iowa law has maintained its commitment to the legal community and encourages students to participate in a variety of programs that better Iowa. For example, Iowa law has recently partnered with the Iowa State Bar Association to start a program that trains and recruits law students to work in rural and small town practices, providing better access to legal services in these communities. Iowa law offers several clinic programs that focus on helping the citizens of Iowa and has several programs to encourage students to provide pro bono legal services. So, for the past 150 years, Iowa law has produced lawyers that embody the model of the state of Iowa, which is, quote, "Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain," end of quote. So I congratulate the Iowa College of Law on its many achievements, and I'm grateful for its continued dedication and commitment to the state of Iowa. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, now that the votes are concluded and we have successfully passed our legislation granting tax relief to millions of Americans.
All right, guys, we are back to join you. Guess what? Ale in the chat room has a question for you.
Who?
Ale.
Okay.
Ron.
Hi, Ale.
The discount rate will also increase. This means, oops. Ron, the discount rate will also increase. This means that banks pay more interest to borrow money. Will banks throw this at us by increasing their own rates too?
Okay, so the discount yeah, well, it's already happened. I mean, we reported the very next morning after the Federal Reserve, which I put up this picture. I thought it was kind of moody. I thought it would get more.
Keep getting cut off by the top
Hello,
5
everybody.
unless you get very close to this
Okay, good.
corner.
I thought it would get more likes. Look at, I just took a picture of the Federal Reserve. So we're a visual business. So let me just show you this picture on Instagram of the actual Federal Reserve building. And I said, since they're in the news, I took this slightly ominous look. Doesn't that look slightly ominous? Do you want to take it over here? Is that better? Since we're talking about it, let's show it.
It's very nice.
That's the Federal Reserve. It's not spooky looking then to you. I was trying to go for a little more ominous, but
look,
no.
it's very pretty.
Oh, fine.
It's just a good picture.
Okay, well, thank you. Come follow me on Instagram, you guys. So the deal is that they did it on Wednesday, and by Thursday morning, we were reporting that they had several of the banks had already increased their prime lending rate. Boom, just that fast. So the thing that's aggravating and frustrating for the average Joe is twofold. You now are going to pay more on your home equity loans. If you have a mortgage, it's locked in. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're shopping for a mortgage, those rates are going to be ticking up. And a quarter of a point on a mortgage, say you're buying a $200,000 house, quarter of a point is going to be, noticeable. I mean, it takes more out of you. I would say a quarter of a point is maybe another $25 a month type of a thing that you would
off
notice.
of a home loan for
Yeah,
sure.
maybe even more, maybe 35 or 40 bucks a month. So if they keep jacking these rates up over the course of the next year and say we're a full percentage point higher, I think it's going to really slow things down. So why? What is the value in slowing things down? The only value would be twofold. That you're nipping inflation in the bud. There is no inflation. The price of gas, oil keeps dropping. The price at the gas pump. You saw where I was talking about how I paid $1.03 a gallon yesterday.
What?
It was with the fries discount, with the grocery store discount.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but the gas was low, and so anyway.
The lowest I've seen 173 around already.
I got a guy on Facebook today who said he just saw this morning $1.49
Where?
in Casa Grande.
Well,
That's
I'm
right
not
up the
gonna
road.
drive to Casa Grande
No, I
just for
know,
the
but if
gas.
it's there, it's on its way. Tucson gets the cheap gas because their stuff comes out of the pipeline from Texas. We get screwed around
Look.
because it comes out of the pipeline from Cali.
All I'm gonna say is that no one here in Phoenix is really getting screwed around too much because it's always $1 more in California.
I know.
So this is still very low gas prices.
Okay, but point being, there really is no inflation. When I go to the grocery store, I'm paying the same for my apples.
103. So how many fries fuel points did you have? You knocked down like 70 cents, 60 cents?
It was 80 cents.
So that means you spent $800 at fries last month?
I think it was like over 2 months.
No, it's 1 month.
No, yeah,
usually.
it goes over. It doesn't all go away in 1 month, in the same month. No, you can roll it over from the month before.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. Because they were saying, in fact, I think they were saying, well, anyway. So, point being that I'm paying the same for my Ritz crackers, $2.50. I'm paying the same for my apples when I go buy my apple. The cost of stuff is not going up except for rent. Rent is going up. Airplane tickets should be coming down, and in some cases they actually are.
Except when you travel for the holidays.
Right. But so for the most part, inflation is not going up, so they don't have to raise it to nip inflation in the bud because it's not happening. The other thing would be that they just want to overall help savers, because the whole concept is people give their money to the bank, they go in, they deposit it all day long, and then the bank says, hey, thanks for your money, here's 2% interest or 3% interest so that you can earn a little bit on it. And then they say, well, we're paying Samia 3% because she brings all her money here to the bank. And so we'll pay her 3%, and then we'll turn around and we'll charge Ron for his mortgage now 6% instead of, where are we right now, about 3.5% to 4%? We'll charge Ron 6% because we had to pay Samia 3%, and we got to make some money on the deal.
Sorry about that.
I am not very happy about it, Samia.
It's okay. It will still be fun.
So there are really only two reasons for doing it. One would be to help savers out, which is primarily older people, right? Older folks are scared of, not everybody, but some are a little frightened of the stock market, not sure about it, would rather just put their money in the bank and earn 2%. But for younger people who are not in a huge hurry to save a bunch of money when they're your age, for example, they're thinking about buying a car, buying a brand new car, starting in your career, buying a brand new house, all those kinds of things. And it just slows down that part of
So
the
are you
economy.
saying it was very smart of me to buy my new car last month?
Yes, that was the bottom line of my whole story.
Okay, just making sure.
But, I
I
mean-
made my first car payment today.
I mean, I want you to buy a house or a condo. They're building 200 condos walkable from the studio. You know that, right? Just on the other side of, about 4 blocks from here on the other side of Van Buren. Are you aware of that?
I did not know that.
There is a huge construction project, and they're building 220 condos right downtown. And then there's another one up on Central, at about this Central and Roosevelt. That would also be walkable. It's up by the Irish Cultural
It's
Center.
cold to walk.
Yeah, but most of the year it's too hot to walk.
So what's the point in having anything that's walkable? It's either too cold to walk or too hot to walk. And you know when it's just moderately, it's mild, then it's raining. It's the monsoon.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just saying, there's not really any walkable weather.
Well, that's why you couldn't walk from 14 blocks away, but you could sure walk from 2 minutes from here. Well, maybe 4 minutes from here. It's very close. But anyway, I would rather have you be buying something, a house. I don't care if you have to drive here. That's fine. You already drive. But you're throwing your rent money away every month when you write that rent check. It's not doing you anything except just getting you a place. If you're buying a house or a condo, I'll give you a good example. So I've talked about how my daughter lives in downtown Salt Lake City. And we just had that story yesterday that's now the #1 city in America for singles. Did you see that?
Really?
I know, you would think it's more of a traditional type town, but...
what was it? Singles looking to get married?
No, I think it was just sort of overall life for singles. I'll have to look more into it. But, so, she lives right in downtown. It's very hoppin'. It's very chic and hip and urban and all that kind of stuff. And they have their own version of a light rail, just like we do too here. But she says, Dad, I'm going to go ahead and buy a condo. I love living downtown. I'm tired of throwing my rent money away. And so she buys a condo for, I don't know, it seemed kind of reasonable. I want to say about $160. And over the last 3 years or so, it's gone up in value to about, I think she said they're now selling for, not a lot more, but like $179. No, hold on. I think she paid $150 for it, and now they're selling for in the upper 170s. So not a huge difference, but she's also been paying the mortgage. Every month you pay your mortgage down. And so she went from $149 to now she owes about $140,000. And now, but they're selling for almost $180,000. That's $40,000 that you, SK.
Oh, I know all
would
about
make.
the housing. I know.
So
the
why
housing
are
market.
Why are you throwing your money away on rent? And this is what I'm doing is taking one question from one person in our chat list and actually trying to make it relatable to everybody.
I get what you're saying.
To buy now. Because
then
interest
you are
rates are
committing
still
to
low.
that location.
Because a year from now, the interest rates will be higher, and it's going to be that much more tough for you to buy a place.
I get what you're
condo.
saying.
Right.
But then you're committing to that location.
You can sell when the time comes. You just sell. There you go.
Okay.
And you probably make some money.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is the problem. I don't know why. Tell me why not all millennials, but a lot of millennials would rather spend $1,000 a month on rent than $1,000 a month on...
Or more than 1,000 on rent.
Yeah, or more than 1,000 than on just buying a place and then selling it when the time comes. Say your dream job. Say your dream job comes in as an offer. Like, what would your dream job be? If you were in made the chair of the new social media department at USC.
No.
And they're like,
that's definitely
SK.
not my dream job.
But you're an SC girl.
I love USC.
And you love social media.
I love USC, but I don't know if I would want to
be there every day.
Okay. No, I mean, I think that if I was working in Los Angeles, then I would definitely want to be an adjunct professor. But other than
adjunct. Okay, fine.
That's just a side gig.
So why are so many millennials afraid to buy a house or a condo?
Commitment. They don't like the idea of a loan. They'd rather have the money in the bank to go on random excursions, travel, things like that.
But what if the monthly cost was less? That's the other part of the story.
Maybe it's because most millennials were coming of age during the housing crisis of the 2000s, and perhaps that instilled fear a decade ago.
Yeah, but that's a long time ago.
I'm just saying.
I mean, the other part of
fears you build in those crucial adolescent years are the fears you take with you into adulthood.
I guess
until you pay to see a therapist.
I guess, yeah. I guess maybe you're right about that. Maybe it's so embedded in your head that those of us who've already bought and sold a couple of houses over the course of the years are like, hey, I actually wish I would have bought a house when it was at the bottom.
Oh, I'm a big fan of real estate. I thought about it last year when I came in, but I just didn't know.
Yeah, well. And you seem like somebody who would kind of like the downtown. Every day there's something new coming into downtown, you know?
I am
we have a lot of good restaurants
the
downtown.
girl that ends up living in the suburbs because she likes her access to Costco and Target.
Okay. Well,
Even
anyway.
in Los Angeles, I lived in like Sherman Oaks.
Oh my gosh, that's a drive.
Not really.
On the 101?
It's
That's like the
10
worst
minutes.
freeway in the West.
It was like 10 minutes everywhere. 10, 20 minutes. I mean, the thing is, if you live in the center
Oh,
of
if
LA
you work
too,
in the
then
valley.
you're not near.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I worked in Universal City. It took me
Okay.
like 5 minutes to get to work.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, anyway.
All that aside.
So, the House passes a spending bill, and now here's my concern about this. So, anyway, thanks for the was that
Question
A? Was that A?
Ale.
So, Ale, thanks for the question. Now, let's transition to point number 1 on our list here,
Well, I do know that Apple Snapple wants to talk about point number 2.
which is
Mother Teresa to become a saint.
yes, yeah. Let's get into that. But this segues so well into
House
the
passes-
spending
yeah,
bill
that's true.
because so again, I think the most important thing we can do when we're covering news is figure out how it relates to you.
Mm-hmm.
So this spending bill thing that got passed includes a provision that takes out a law that was put in place after the oil embargo back in the 1970s when we all had gas lines. I know you weren't around, but I'm sure you heard the stories and have seen the pictures. It was ridiculous. You had to sit camped, waiting in line sometimes for 30 minutes, 45 minutes
What?
just to fill up your gas tank.
What year was this?
In 1973. You could wiki it. Just say oil embargo 1973. In fact, the pictures that would pop up, I'm sure, would blow your mind.
I've never heard about this
No.
in my life.
Really?
Yep.
There was a law that was passed.
Did not know about this.
I'm gonna say
my dad
oil.
was in Canada I think.
Well, in Canada
Or they
was
were
also.
just coming to the United States.
Okay, here we go. Oil embargo 1973. See, it immediately pops up. Everybody's going to know what it is. And look at some of the pictures. Look at this picture right here. I think you can use that, right?
Yeah.
Off of
give me a
Google.
second.
People lined up. Of course, the cars were so old-fashioned. They're lined up all the way around the block, double file, and then they do like a loop and come in. Can you see the direction the cars are headed? So literally, you were dealing with situations like that where if you even saw a gas station that was open, you changed your plans for the day and you immediately pulled in,
That's
and then you
insane.
waited in a line like that. Now, there was a law that was put into effect so to protect our country from that ever happening again. And it said the oil that we drill here in the U.S. and the gas that we turn that into, it all stays here in the United States.
Yeah, it should be ours.
It should be ours. It is our raw material. You get it here, you refine it here, so that means refinery jobs, and then you truck it here, and so that means jobs for truckers. Or you could take the opposite approach and say, hey, we the oil companies want to make as much money as we can, and we actually think we can make more money no longer selling it to our local customers, the American public. We think we can make more money if we send it to China. Well, that's never been allowed for the last 40 years. Guess what?
What?
As part of the spending bill, now it's going to be allowed. Now, how is that good for America? It's you could look at it and say, well, it's free enterprise. It's better for free enterprise. That's fine. I'm up for free enterprise on most things, on pretty much everything. But
But
our
you've lived through
economy
this.
comes
You've
to
lived through
our economy
this.
comes to a complete stop if the oil's not around. And we got it. And the oil companies have been pushing people in Congress for years to change that law.
Can I just point out Rachel's comment? Costco is like that every day, Hooner. Those lines around the pump. That's true. Unless you get to Costco right when the pump's open. I think
Yeah.
it's like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m.
Yeah. Look at
You're
D
pretty
just
good.
rocking. I remember getting up at 3 a.m. to try to find gas before work.
Wow.
At noon. It was that crazy.
Wow.
So Dontavia says, we are not joking. The people that just passed this bill are traitors to America. Well, yeah, I mean, you could feel that strongly. I don't think they're traitors, but I just think they're beholden to the oil companies. Now, this gets us to Donald Trump. Why do people like Donald Trump?
Because he wants to make America great again.
Yes, and he's the most blunt, non-PC guy you've ever run into. And he really isn't beholden to the oil company, or like there's a story yesterday on Marco Rubio and his, connections to the sugar industry and subsidies they get from the government. And, Is he too pro sugar or whatever?
Pro sugar?
Yeah. But anyway.
This is like a diabetes movement.
Yeah, I know.
What?
But point being, most politicians are going to do this at the bidding of the oil company, and it stinks. Well, I have no idea where Donald Trump comes down on this, but his selling point is, I'm not taking money from anybody. He pulls up in his 757 at the Mesa Airport, So people like the fact that they know what's going on. People are way smarter than the politicians give them credit for. And they know what's going on. They know these guys, it's a self-fulfilling thing where they got to be able to get reelected. So they take money from all the big interests, and there's plenty of money coming out of the oil industry. And I don't know how many people have taken donations from the big oil companies, but it's ridiculous. And if it leads to a lot of our oil and a lot of our gas 5 years from now not being here so they can make an extra $10 a barrel selling it to China, then people are going to demand Congress do something. And you know what? This is passing on a Friday. And next week is the holidays.
The next two. I mean, this is pretty, like I said, today's like the end of the school year.
People aren't even aware of it.
The semester.
I felt like I needed to bring it to you guys, but most people are not even aware that it's in there. And it's not going to be a problem for a while. But someday down the line, whether it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it will be a problem. So there's your House spending bill. Now, they did put some good things in there.
Elaborate.
They re-upped the funds for the families of 9/11 responders.
Which is a very honorable cause.
Correct. And not just the families, it's really more focused on the health issues that people who were first responders have been dealing with ever since.
So what Jon Stewart was pushing for over and over.
Got passed.
Along with a number of
Correct.
New York officials.
Right. Got passed.
That's
and actually,
news.
I think that it was good that they beat the drum, but I don't think in the end, people still, their hearts still ache for the victims of 9/11 and for the first responders who are dealing with health issues.
Well, right.
And I don't think eventually it was going to get figured out.
Yeah, it's not fair that you're suffering health issues because you tried to save people and do the right thing.
Correct. So, all in all, great. I'm glad the government got more money to stick around, to run all these programs for the next year. But they put some things in there that, with this oil business, just remember, you heard it here first from Hooner and SK time. Or as Samia said today as she's writing up her notes, Ronald and SK.
Did it say Ronald and SK or Ronald and Samia? I probably said SK. I never read my full name.
I saw Ronald.
Yeah.
What?
Ronald and SK.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, there's the House spending bill. The other thing is they basically take it off the table to get us all the way through the election cycle of next year. Remember we talked about that once. That one way or another they were going to figure out how to get that done, so it wasn't some huge issue because it always hurts the Republicans. So they did have that. At least I'm sure Paul Ryan had it in the back of his mind, and some others too. So it's done, and it's 1.1 trillion. So that's.
So with the House passing the spending bill, then it goes to the Senate, then it goes to the President.
Correct. House already passed it. The reason we were popping up those Senate pictures a minute ago is the Senate's voting on it right now. Mm-hmm. It's unusual for them to be working on a Friday. They almost never do. But now they get to have their
Christmas
at least 2-week vacation, if not 3 weeks. I don't know. They get a lot of vacation time.
Not a bad job. Not a bad gig.
No,
being
I know.
a
Right.
U.S. representative.
Yep.
Or senator.
So, you got plenty of topic. Yeah, see, I knew that was coming. Did you hear that?
What?
As soon as you got plenty of topics, and I hear, all right, guys, let's go. I got this meeting I got to go to.
It's okay.
But it is cool that Mother
Teresa
is becoming a saint.
I know. Her canonization, I think they're talking about September. Mm-hmm. That's the rumor on the internet.
Yeah. Well, there's 1 billion Catholics. That's a lot of people.
Do you remember our extensive Pope coverage here when he was in the United States? News Now, FNN turned into PNN, Pope News Now.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're TNN, Trump News Now.
Yeah.
It depends on what's, the thing to talk about.
Yep. Okay, so I think Aile's going, oh, I hope you feel better, Samia. I love you, says
thanks.
Ale. Totally taking care
I
of
am
you.
definitely at the 1 week point of this sickness. I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
It's a struggle.
Rachel says, no meetings, sad panda, no meetings for Hooner, but I have to. I mean, this schedule, people are like, really? You get up at 3 in the morning and you go on at 4:30 and you're on till 10, and then we have so much of a social media commitment that we're supposed to be doing now.
Yeah.
Oh my
I see
gosh.
that. You guys keep talking about all your social media on the morning show now.
I know we do a lot of, and so now we run polls on our Twitter pages. I love Instagram; it's my favorite. I'm trying to put at least one pic, if not a couple.
I'm telling you,
every
get
day.
into Snapchat. I don't know why.
Because it's too much.
You guys aren't
I
into
haven't
Snapchat.
Periscope.
Snapchat is the #1 social media network right now. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, anyways, okay. So nice hanging out with you.
Good time.
You do actually feel a little better, don't you?
I mean,
now?
I'm much better now than I was Wednesday.
Yeah.
Much better now than I was yesterday.
Okay.
Nowhere near as bad as I was last week,
Yeah.
which none of them saw because I chose to go home instead of go on air.
Yeah.
So on
Good that you did.
On that note, I am going to play a story about the spending bill from
Oh.
Fox National
Good.
because I have it.
Like it.
Congress budget battle. All right.
Bye.
Bye, Ronald.
Bye, everybody.
On this vote, the yeas are 316, the nays are 113.
The House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a budget that keeps the government open through September of next year. It includes increases in funding for national defense, an extension of health care, and compensation for 9/11 first responders. The budget's passage capped off a long list of accomplishments for House Speaker Paul Ryan, who only assumed the office nearly 2 months ago with a pledge of bipartisanship.
This has been a busy month for all of us. We've passed more major legislation in a few weeks than we have in a few years.
The spending package includes $700 billion in tax credits for college expenses, child costs, and low-income families. It also includes tax cuts for many companies and home builders. Republicans also successfully won an end to a 40-year-old ban on oil exportation. But the measure fell short of defunding Planned Parenthood and tightening Syrian refugee screening. That's a win for Democrats.
They wanted to dismantle women's health, to eliminate the Clean Power Plan, to prevent vital oversight of Wall Street, to sabotage campaign finance reform, to devastate organized labor in our country.
Meanwhile, many fiscal watchdogs and conservatives are blasting the budget deal, saying it grows the government and the deficit. In Washington, Doug McKelway, Fox News.
This was the story yesterday, before anything was passed.
With strong Republican support, the House voted 318 to 109 to approve $650 billion in tax relief over 10 years by making some 20 breaks permanent. Speaker Paul Ryan called it a pivotal step toward tax reform.
Families and businesses are going to have the long-term certainty that they need instead of scrambling year after year to find out what's next.
The House Democratic whip blasted the fact it is adding to our $18 trillion debt.
The certainty of this bill is that we will explode further deficits and provide for disinvestment. That's the certainty of this bill, and I rise in strong opposition to it.
The House is expected to vote tomorrow on a $1.1 trillion package that would fund the government through next September.
The spending bill has some big wins for the country, whether it's lifting the oil export ban, increasing military spending, or renewing health care for the 9/11 first responders.
However, critics note it is a 2,000-plus page bill unveiled at the end of the year.
It is a stunning amount of money, and it's not the kind of consideration that we need. The American people lose control of their government when they don't get a chance to see their representatives vote for or against bills.
Some liberal and minority Democrats are upset about removing the crude oil export ban and that a bailout for Puerto Rico wasn't included.
I think these things kind of happen at the end with these bills.
First, the funding package must pass the House. Senator Marco Rubio hinted on Fox he might try to slow things up when it gets to the Senate, but Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has secured an agreement for votes. On Capitol Hill, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
We list many more important accomplishments in this omnibus legislation. Now, I must tell you, there are some disappointments. One of the major disappointments is that we didn't follow regular order. It would have been much better to pass each of the appropriation bills, to have the tax bill considered as an independent bill and have these other issues, and done it in an orderly way rather than looking at it on December 18th. So I would hope that in the future we will return to regular order where we have, I think, a better chance of improving legislation with participation from all members. Secondly, I was very disappointed that included in this legislation was the lifting of the ban on oil exports, energy exports. Now, the reason I'm so upset about that is that I think that should have been a separate issue. It should have been taken up in consideration with the energy policies of America and our environmental policies and the economic impact, the security impact.
Guys, I'm going to cut out of the Senate because I'm joined by a special guest, Hans Peterson. I'm going to actually take us on this camera instead because it looks nicer, I guess. So we're going to actually go here. But you did see that Star Wars Day was bullet point number 5 in my top 5. And to expand upon that is Hans. When did you get to see the movie?
I actually got to see the movie Tuesday. I was one of the few people. I know. I've been literally trying really hard not to give up any spoilers, not tell anybody anything about the movie. It's been tough. Yeah.
Well, you're still not really allowed to give away any spoilers because I'm assuming most of the audience still hasn't really seen it. But I'm hearing some very positive reactions.
It's really good. I didn't think I was a big Star Wars fan, but I've seen all the movies. My brother's the real Star Wars fan. But this
was your brother jealous that you got to see it
He was really
super
jealous.
early?
He was really jealous. A few people were on Facebook. It really was amazing. I was blown away. I think it's certainly one of the best ever.
So what made it so great? I mean, the thing is, Star Wars already has this hype around it, you know? Yeah. I don't really know a lot of people speaking negatively of any of the 6 Star Wars films. People have their favorites. But, you know, they're all kind of viewed upon fairly favorably, right?
Absolutely. I think the first and second episodes are known to be not quite as fantastic as the others. I think some fans might agree with me on that.
But they still like them.
Yeah. Many did. I think people my age, I'm in my 40s, I think people my age were not such fans of episodes 1, 2, and 3 because they were all digital, or so much of the CG was digital.
That's what came out, was it in the 90s or the 2000s? 90s.
Late 90s and 2000s.
90s,
I think it was 99, 2002, and 2005. And I'll say, though, what's amazing about this new movie is that they really keep the CG to a minimum. They keep the digital look to a minimum. It reminds me of the first 3 movies in that sense, the 1977, 1980, and 1983 movies, and that they really look like you're watching all this unfold in real time, real action. You don't feel like you're looking at people in front of a green screen.
Right.
You know?
Just for people who don't really know Star Wars, so initially, way back in the day, you had episodes 4, 5, and 6, which were the first ones to come out. So don't think these actually came out in chronological orders. That in and of itself was kind of weird if you think about it. So you have 4, 5, and 6. And then they decided to tell the story of 1, 2, and 3, and now we're at 7.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
There's no 3.5 or anything like that. So now we're at the very.
And I think supposedly there will be a 3.5. There's talk about Disney
3.5.
making. Well, they're not going to call it that, but the standalone movies.
Call it?
They're going to be a movie, and I forget the title. I'm sure a fan out there knows it, but. They're going to call it. It's going to basically be about what happened before the original 1977 Star Wars, how they got the plans for the Death Star, how those were smuggled out. That's my understanding. But,
I want to check in with the chat room. Larry 5200 saying the original trilogy was better. I found the newer ones boring. Bean Prophet saying it's very hard to make a bad movie nowadays. Let's see. Star Wars makes my OCD explode. Rachel, because of the lack of chronological order.
I'm curious what people thought who did see it. Obviously, without spoilers, but I'm just curious. I think a couple people said they saw it and liked it, but I'm just curious what people out there think. My brother had a couple issues with it, which surprised me because I just thought it was near flawless. But my brother had a couple issues. He thought. I don't want to say too much, but he thought there were a couple issues. He thought there's a new character named Poe, and he thought there was not enough explained about Poe, a newer character who we don't see for a while in the movie. But
Yeah. I want to point out Jay Scooz's comment, nerds everywhere got married yesterday. We
so
actually
cool seeing those
carried
weddings.
a Star Wars wedding live here on News Now yesterday afternoon, the one that took place in Hollywood, which was super sponsored and branded. It was like cake from Baskin Robbins, this brand's giving this and that, and it was this big sponsorship deal. But I think there was another Star Wars wedding. We were getting a lot of different videos of Star Wars related activities going on. Couple married at Star Wars movie in Minnesota.
Nice.
Did you see this?
I heard at least 2. I think Andrea Robinson was saying earlier that she knew of at least 2 that happened.
Yeah, this
Certainly.
one, there was the Minnesota one and the Hollywood one. Do you want to watch the video about the Minnesota one?
Sure.
Let's watch it. Because it's...
Nice.
They bought their tickets in October, showed up in costume, and sat back for a movie they've waited 10 years to see. But before the film could roll, a galactic ceremony was set to take place. In front of several hundred moviegoers, Anthony Nygren and Meg Thompson exchanged vows fit for a rebel fighter.
I promise to love you faithfully like Chewbacca to your Han Solo.
In a wedding they only had 1 week to prepare for, as they won it in a radio contest.
We submitted real quick and they picked us and we're like, how about next Thursday?
And while she agreed to marry her sweetheart ahead of the big movie premiere, Meg admits she wasn't always a Star Wars fan.
No, but I love it. It's such a fun story and I love him, so it's kind of perfect.
So she knew that we were, what she was getting into when she started dating.
And while the bride didn't mimic the famous Star Wars princess for her big day, rest assured Princess Leia was by her side as a bridesmaid.
I'm like upset that I'm wearing white at her wedding, but kind of had to.
I now pronounce you joined in marriage. You may kiss your princess.
And as for children, Meg and Anthony say there will be a few, but they'll leave the Star Wars theme with the wedding, as they say Luke and Leia are out of the question when it comes to names.
That was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, very cool.
Would any of you guys willingly have a Star Wars wedding out there? Would you?
I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm that big of a fan. But
Yeah.
I would love to go to one. My cousin had a water park wedding. So maybe I do a Disneyland wedding. That would be my
that would be fun.
compromise.
So let's just check in with the chat room. I know you asked them for their thoughts. Some of them have seen it. Apple Snapple loved it. Tess is asking for no spoilers. Adam saying no backstory on Poe was annoying.
It was a little bit, yeah.
Let's see.
And I want to interject, I thought Carrie Fisher was amazing. I thought she was so good. I just had to say that. She's, she has like a grizzled kind of been there, done that kind of quality, and I thought it worked nicely with General Leia Organa.
Bean asking, is Natalie Portman in this film?
No, Natalie, I'm sorry.
Rachel is going to wait till DVD to watch it. But the thing is, if you're going to watch a movie like Star Wars, you might as well see it in theaters because of the whole experience.
Yeah. I really want to see
sound, everything,
Maybe 3D. I want to see it in 3D again now, this time around, maybe in IMAX. So it's definitely worth doing. Don't wait till DVD if you can help it.
If you want to see it. Let's put it that way.
Right,
if you want to see it, go see it in theaters. Otherwise,
there's Sisters, Danish Girl. They're really good.
Well, Hans, thanks for giving us your expertise.
Definitely.
I'm actually going to play this clip for the viewers. This one's pretty funny, of people having fun in line while waiting for the Star Wars movie. If I can find the clip. Sometimes I download clips and then can't find where I put them.
It seems like that's one thing I missed out on was the fun in line. It seems like a lot of people had fun in line.
Yeah, there were some great
bonding kind of.
Where is it? I don't know. That's unfortunate. Oh, right here. Star Wars fans have fun in lines. We're going to show them that. Cool. Thanks for hanging out,
like an action show or something.
know people were waiting in line to see that movie late last night. It looks like it wasn't too boring, at least in the state of Washington. I would continue with some of my top 5, but it looks like we're getting a live press conference in from Mitch McConnell, Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, holding a press conference right now. Maybe he's talking about the spending bill. I don't know. Let's listen in.
President, right after he's sworn in, ought to go into the Oval Office and start undoing all of this stuff, all of it, as quickly as he can, and then do comprehensive tax reform, and America will take off like a rocket.
How would you pay for the lower rates? How would you pay for the lower rates to keep it revenue neutral?
What you do is, when you take the preferences out, the revenue produced by that is used to buy down rates.
Each preference.
You make, oh, I'm not, that's a big, complicated subject. But almost everybody who's looked at this, it's been 30 years since we did the last one, 1986. Everybody agrees in principle it needs to be done. But the only way you really get rates down is to use the revenue produced by eliminating the preferences to buy down the rates. The territorial that you mentioned a minute ago, the territorial proposal that was floating around here, it wasn't going to buy down rates, it was going to be spent. In other words, whatever revenue was produced by going to that was going to be spent by the government, not used to buy down rates. That's not what tax reform is about. Tax reform is about getting rates down and not having an impact on the government's revenue, either up or down. Although most of us believe that a more competitive country is going to produce more revenue. That's what happened after the 86 Act, and I think it would happen again.
Senator, what do you think?
Yeah.
Senator Durbin said just a moment ago that the closure on final passage of the conference report on customs is in doubt. Do you think that by separating out the internet access tax and the online sales tax proposals that he and others are pushing, separating that from the customs bill might make it easier to pass that?
Yeah, I don't know quite what the way forward is on customs next year, but it's certainly high on the agenda.
Mr. Leader?
Yeah.
I want to ask about Puerto Rico. There seems to be an understanding on the other side of the building that Democrats and Speaker Ryan have that he's going to get his relevant committees working on something in the first quarter. Do you have a similar agreement over here to take action, or is this something that's going to be happening mostly on the House side? And are you planning for time for this issue?
Yeah, we haven't been discussing that issue over here yet. I read, as you indicated, there was some discussions in the House. I've not been involved in any of those discussions yet. I may well be in the future, but I just haven't yet.
Senator, what do you think of the criticism that there's too many extra things added to the budget, like a ship that maybe the Coast Guard didn't ask for, or an extra in Bath Navy Works, a ship in Maine that's being requested is being built, not necessarily from the budget. How do you feel that there's too much spending above and beyond the limits that were planned?
Well, this is the kind of thing that can happen when you have an omnibus as opposed to having individual appropriation bills that are thoroughly vetted, done in the open, where everybody's got a chance to see what's in the bill. And that's why I hope, and I hear the Democrats are saying the same thing, and if they are, I like that. I know Harry has said on several occasions we want to pass each appropriation bill next year. I say amen. Help us do it, and we'll do it. You had your hand up.
Last year you said that TPA and cyber were two areas where you could work with the president, and you have. And so I wondered where next year you see a common ground.
Well, I hope we will have some. Yeah, obviously the bills that I've been referring to, most of them the president's been willing to sign. And TPA and cyber were near the top of my list. We've accomplished both of those, and he's signed one, is going to sign the other one shortly. I've gone as far as I can go about what next year's agenda is going to be. You all are familiar with the things that are being discussed that seem to have some bipartisan support, and all of those types of issues will be competing for attention. And it becomes my responsibility to decide what to give floor time to, and it's always a tough challenge because the floor time is the coin of the realm in the Senate. What are you going to devote time to? And I'm not here to announce that today, other than we really are going to try to do every single appropriation bill. Anyone else? Okay, thanks a lot. Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm sure you're going to miss us, right? Yeah. See you later.
Enjoy the warm weather this year.
I'm going to a bowl game.
Which one?
Music City in Nashville.
Alright guys, it looks like we have lost the feed. Give me a second while I end up back on camera. Stand by. I know that I have to get to this story right away because Apple Snap on the chat room is very curious and wants to know more about this bullet point right here, Mother Teresa to become a saint. So while I tell you about the story, let me first pull up some file video in case you don't remember what Mother Teresa looks like, or maybe some of you are just very young and were not around during her time and have never seen a photo for some reason. Let me just pull up this video for you, or some photos. There we go. All right, so big news. Mother Teresa. Basically, Pope Francis has signed off on the miracle needed to make Mother Teresa a saint, giving the tiny nun who cared for the poorest of the poor one of the Catholic Church's highest honors 2 decades after her death. The Vatican said Friday that Francis approved a decree attributing a miracle to Mother Teresa's intercession during an audience with the head of the Vatican's saint-making office on Thursday, his 79th birthday. Now, no date was set for the canonization, but Italian media have speculated that the ceremony will take place in the first week of September to coincide with the anniversary of Mother Teresa's death and during Pope Francis's Holy Year of Mercy. Now, a spokeswoman for the Missionaries of Charity in the eastern city of Calcutta, India, said, quote, "This is fantastic news. We are very happy." That is where Mother Teresa lived and worked. Now, the miracle responsible for Mother Teresa's canonization concerned the inexplicable cure of a Brazilian man suffering from a viral brain infection that resulted in multiple abscesses. By December 9, 2008, he was in a coma and dying, suffering from an accumulation of fluid around the brain. Now, in case you have any questions about Mother Teresa and the making of a saint, I might have some answers for you. How about this question? How are saints made? Well, a postulator, essentially the cheerleader spearheading the project, gathers testimony and documentation and presents the case to the Vatican's Congregation for the Causes of Saints. If the congregation's experts agree the candidate lived a virtuous life, then the case is forwarded to the Pope, who signs a decree attesting to the candidate's heroic virtues. Now, the Catholic Church makes saints to provide role models for the faithful, and Pope Francis had followed in the footsteps of his predecessors in turning them out at a rapid clip. Now, the process is cloaked in secrecy and open to criticism, given that it deals with science-defying miracles, politicized choices, and significant sums of money, as was recently revealed in some blockbuster books on Vatican finance. But saints aren't going away anytime soon, and Francis has actually made the process easier in some ways by doing away with the miracle requirement for several high-profile saints. Now, in case you want to know more about Mother Teresa, I can tell you that as well. Mother Teresa, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, died on September 5th, 1997, at the age of 87. At the time, her Missionaries of Charity Order had nearly 4,000 nuns and ran roughly 600 orphanages, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and clinics around the world. Now, Pope Francis, whose papacy has been dedicated to ministering to the poor, just as Mother Teresa did, is a known fan of Mother Teresa. During his September 2014 visit to Albania, that is not Pope Francis. I don't know why that video is on the screen as I'm specifically talking about popes. It's just part of our file video that we had. Here, we're going to use some stills now. How about that? That's better. Give me a second while I get some water, guys. Stand by. All right, guys, I have gotten water. I can continue communicating with you. Now, Pope Francis recounted that he had met Mother Teresa, who was an ethnic Albanian, when they attended a 94 bishop... hold on one second. Stand by again, guys. Coughing. All right, guys, back to Mother Teresa. Pope Francis met Mother Teresa at the Vatican together in 1994. Mother Teresa herself was born August 26, 1910 in Macedonia. She was actually born Agnes Grancha Bajaksu. I can't pronounce her name, to be honest. There's a lot of X's involved, and it's pretty interesting to learn these Mother Teresa facts. She joined the Loreto Honor of Nuns in 1926, and in 1946, while traveling by train from Calcutta to Darjeeling, was inspired to found the Missionaries of Charity Order. The order was established 4 years later and has since opened more than 130 houses worldwide to provide comfort and care for the needy, sick, and the poorest of the poor. Mother Teresa won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979 for her work with Calcutta's destitute and ill, work which continued even after she herself became sick. Mother Teresa said in 1977, quote, "The poor give us much more than we give them. They're such strong people living day to day with no food, and they never curse, never complain." St. John Paul II, one of Mother Teresa's greatest champions, waived the normal 5-year waiting period for her beautification process to begin and launched it a year after she died, convinced of her saintliness and apparently intent on at least beautifying her in this lifetime. He bestowed the honor on her in 2003 in a Vatican ceremony. Now, the miracle needed for her canonization, as I mentioned, concerns the inexplicable cure in 2008 of a man in Brazil with multiple brain... Wow. Sickness is coming back, guys. You know what? I'm just going to play a clip of people reacting to Mother Teresa's sainthood in the meantime.
Yeah, for me, I feel it's a very wonderful thing, especially she is always a good example to the world, especially the world that is filled with egoism. She has left for us an example of taking care of one another, knowing that we are one in Christ. It doesn't necessarily matter where you come from or your social strata. In other words, when you see a person that is suffering, it doesn't matter his religion or her religion or where the person comes from, that you have to try to help the person.
All right, guys, we're going to go to Chicago now to hear more about, I believe it is a cop on trial. Let's go ahead and listen in on, I believe his lawyer is speaking.
And if at any time the same situation occurs where we believe they're going to be a threat, then again, the Joint Terrorism Task Force will take action at that point also.
We are living in a world of terrorism, but is this a warning to people in the central Pennsylvania area to even be more alert at this point? Was he contacting people in the area, or was it out of the area? What should people be thinking on this day after this guy's arrested?
You know, again, these type of investigations are going on in states all across the country, very similar to this. And, you know, the situation where a San Bernardino situation occurs.
All right, guys, I don't think that the announcement having to do with the cuff has actually been sent. I think they misannounced it. This seems to have to do with terrorism. I'm not really sure. Let's just watch, and I'll try to find out more information.
Previous years for terrorism incidents like this. So although this one touches home, it's not any different than sort of what is happening around the country.
Do you believe he was planning an attack? Do you have any evidence of that?
You know, if you saw what was recovered during the search warrant, you know, high-capacity magazines loaded. Obviously, the weapon wasn't found at this point. But it's those type of things and the rhetoric that he's using that draws concern. And that's why, you know, law enforcement and the Joint Terrorism Task Force isn't going to wait till it gets to a point where that our action will be too late. You know, so we're going to intervene at a point where concerns are raised to a point where we think there is a threat against the public.
What should the public make of that? It was an interesting issue. He has 5 magazines that are loaded with .223 ammunition.
but no gun for it.
Yeah. Again, I think the public can view that the exact same way law enforcement would. You know what I mean? Obviously, if he's got the magazines, our immediate concern is there's a weapon involved somewhere. And so, when a search warrant is done like that, when an arrest is done like that, in every one of these cases, the weapon itself is the top priority moving forward.
You want people to be more vigilant. What do you want them to be looking for?
You know, that's always a question that comes up. And the thought for us is, if you're seeing something out of the ordinary, if you're seeing something that's not normal behavior, is when we'd like you to call the tip line. You can call the tip line or see something, send something. And for us to be able to exactly explain what that is, so many of these cases, whether it's stopped before an incident like this one in Harrisburg or like in San Bernardino, there was somebody that saw something different, that recognized a change in the person, and in many cases, they called law enforcement. In some cases, after the fact, they said, hey, we saw this, we noticed a difference, and they didn't make the call. So our thought is make the call. Call the terrorism tip line, send something on see something, send something, so that we can take action. So many times it's parents, it's family members, it's coworkers, it's clergy members, it's teachers that notice a difference, and they see a change in someone, and at that point, that's where law enforcement wants to get involved. And I think it should be noted that in so many cases that there is a time to intervene. There is a time to intervene, and it's not always law enforcement that does that. And many times it is parents, it is clergy members that intervene, and the path of that person is changed. And so that's always our starting point on what we'd like to hope to happen.
Do we know if he went to a local mosque? Did he attend a local mosque?
Now, that information has not been put out yet.
Do we know, have his parents been questioned in any way, or were they tied into this investigation? Can you elaborate on that?
I cannot at this time.
Do you know, has anyone from the public called in about this guy before and gave you guys a tip regarding him?
I can't comment on that also. Sorry.
Would you say that this incident has changed anything for us living in this area?
I think in law enforcement in this area, and I know the state police has been a leader in that, is really pushing out the idea of people being vigilant. Again, we do not want people to live in fear. We want people to be vigilant of what's going on here. ISIS, the actions that they take, their intention would like us to live in fear, and that's not really what we want to do. We want to ensure that people are aware of their surroundings and vigilant, and when they notice something out of the ordinary, to call police.
In a case like this, many residents have said they almost thought that house was vacant. What can they do to be vigilant in a situation like that where they don't even know the person's there?
Yeah, that is a difficult one, and so many times the tips that really work for us are ones where somebody have some sort of an acquaintance with the person. There are some of us know our neighbors very well. Other neighbors you don't know that well at all. But when it's when it's a friend, when it's a coworker, when it's a relative, those are going to be the people that really see a difference. And when they do see that difference, that's when we're asking them to reach out to law enforcement or in some way take action themselves to try and steer the person in a different direction.
I know there's some cases, I think in California, where someone saw something but they didn't want to racial.
All right, guys, we're going to cut out of this and go live now to Bernie Sanders' press conference. In case you did not hear, Bernie Sanders facing some heat for a data breach.
Going to sabotage our campaign, one of the strongest grassroots campaigns in modern history. We are announcing today that if the DNC continues to hold our data hostage and continues to try to attack the heart and soul of our grassroots campaign, we will be in federal court this afternoon seeking immediate relief. What is required here is a full and independent audit of the DNC's mishandling of this data and its security from the beginning of this campaign to the present, including the incident in October that we alerted them to when we are fairly confident that large amounts of our data were sent to another campaign. Thank you very much. This is Brad Deutsch, who represents the campaign on our legal team, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have.
Can you assure the DNC and the Clinton campaign that you no longer possess any of the Clinton campaign's data?
I can tell you that this campaign, in an official capacity, does not possess any data, does not retain any data, doesn't want any of their data. In fact, when their data, due to this October breach, was dumped into a vendor of ours' computer system, we had it isolated, locked up, and we alerted the DNC immediately. We're running a clean campaign. We're going to beat Secretary Clinton and everybody else in this campaign on the issues. We don't need dirty tricks. That's not how we run it here.
Which campaign do you think had access to your data?
Well, I think after this independent audit, we will find that out. Look, we are investigating that. One of the ironies of this situation is because the DNC has inappropriately cut us off from access to the VAN, the voter network, it makes it impossible for us to do any kind of independent review of who looked at what during that time period. So what we did is we immediately froze the email accounts of all employees we suspected were involved. We reviewed all of their emails and Google documents. We restored any documents or emails that they had deleted during the relevant time periods and have reviewed them all, and the investigation internally is ongoing. You know, in the heat of these campaigns, sometimes young people make misjudgments.
How do you know
right?
that data wasn't used?
Because I manage this campaign. I know data is being used.
Was anything downloaded?
No data that I'm aware of was exported in a way that could be used by anybody.
Sir, NBC has documents to show that up to 10 early voting states may have been accessed and that efforts were made to store the data, and that as many as 4 campaign staffers.
NGP issued an after-action report which said that none of these reports were printed and none of them were exported. So I'm relying on NGP, and I have to rely on them. Unfortunately, the DNC's monopoly vendor has sole access to this information because we've been cut off from it. So whatever you're hearing from them, you're getting their side of the story, and has not been verified by us, and that's why we look forward to a full, independent audit of the DNC's handling of data going forward.
How can this inhibit your campaign from getting out the vote in Iowa and New Hampshire?
Look, this is taking our campaign hostage. We have a grassroots campaign, right? So when we have people come to our campaign headquarters to call volunteers or to call voters to talk to them about Bernie Sanders' campaign to transform America, we can't generate phone numbers to do that. It's impossible to mobilize the kind of grassroots campaign we have without access to that data. And we are, because of the nature of our campaign, peculiarly affected by this type of taking of data hostage by the DNC.
Does it make it impossible for you to win?
It does not make it impossible to win, because I think people across this country, and I think we're beginning to see it now already online, are outraged by this conduct by the DNC, which is clearly a heavy-handed attempt to undermine this campaign.
Has the DNC given you any indication how long they plan to freeze your access to their data?
To our data. How long they're going to freeze our access to our own data? They have not. And that's why we're going to have to go to federal court if this is not resolved very, very shortly to vindicate the rights not only of this campaign, but of the millions of people across this country who want change. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Once the person's already fired, but it's that many as 4 or 5 access to data, are you going to fire anyone else?
Well, as I mentioned, we are doing an internal investigation. Further disciplinary action may come, depending on what we find. But the truth is that our ability to investigate this has been inhibited by our inability to look at the van that's been withheld from us. So the DNC is, by their own action, is hindering our ability to do the kind of investigation that they say that they want.
Your former staffer says he wasn't trying to collect data on the Clinton campaign. He was just trying to probe the extent of this vulnerability. Is it possible you overreacting and firing?
We have very, very high ethical standards in this campaign, right? Bernie Sanders is a different kind of candidate. We're running a campaign to transform America. So people who work on this campaign have to understand that even the appearance of something that's not right is too much. And so we did let that staffer go. I think that was a clear signal that we take this very, very seriously, both with respect to our data and other people's data. We will certainly not use anybody else's data or retain anybody else's data. The DNC is clearly acting in a heavy-handed way, in an unprecedented way. I would like to see another instance where a presidential campaign had their data withheld, their own data withheld under similar circumstances. So, excuse me? 2 months ago, we found out when we were downloading some of our data that it was dumping a bunch of other campaigns' data along with ours, which clearly indicated that the firewall between the campaigns was ineffective, right? We immediately segregated that information at our vendor, put it in a password protected file so that we could document that in fact there had been a breach, because we were very concerned that large amounts of our own data was being downloaded, and we contacted the DNC to remedy the situation. They assured us, we run down here to all of you all, we talked to them, and we were assured that this was going to be taken care of. But apparently they are not competent in terms of maintaining the security of data between the campaigns. What's that?
Is the DNC taking sides with the Clinton campaign?
Sure. All I can tell you, I don't know the motivation of every single person over the DNC, but I think if you look at a pattern of conduct, we've obviously had concern about the Saturday night debate schedule and its impact on the ability of campaigns to get their message out. Clearly, there's in this case, it looks like they are trying to help the Clinton campaign. We're taking on the establishment, and I'm sure there are people within the Democratic establishment who are not happy about the overwhelming success that Senator Sanders is having all across this country. But we are determined to win this campaign, and we're going to win this campaign by talking about the issues that are important to the American people. To do that, we need our data, which has been stolen by the DNC. That's what we want back. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right, guys, that is a wrap on that press conference. I do have details regarding the press conference we were watching right before. Remember when I said it was something about terror? Well, we have details now, and I want to tell you guys about those details. That press conference also just wrapped up, so we can't go back to it, but giving you some details, this has to do with a local person in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who was charged with an ISIS-related threat. Apparently, it involves an FBI raid. Some guy accused of spreading ISIS propaganda. So that's all I know right now. That's all that Fox National told us. So that was the press conference we were listening to earlier. I'm going to go back to this House passes spending bill topic, because earlier today, the members of the House, well, at least some of them, held a press conference, and I am going to play it for you now regarding the spending bill. Stand by. I believe it is the House Dems. Yep, that's Nancy Pelosi.
American people. We have finally renewed the 9/11 and health and compensation bill. That compensation bill. Oh, the Droga Act. That is such an accomplishment. My congratulations to our appropriators, especially our ranking member, Congresswoman Nita Lowey of New York, for whom 9/11 was a priority, as it is for all of us, but our New Yorkers especially focused on it. This is your day, Nita. Because of the passage, because of your leadership, we passed the best possible under the circumstances appropriations bill. I think our success with our members is that in the Republicans' obsession with lifting the oil export ban, they really gave away the store. Democrats were able to strip our scores and scores of poison pills, destructive poison pills, some of which they had to have, which they ended up with not having. And those would... They're called poison pills because they have a toxic effect, not only on the legislation, not only the number of votes they could get or not get, but because of what they do. They wanted to dismantle women's health, to eliminate the Clean Power Plan, to prevent vital oversight of Wall Street, to sabotage campaign finance reform, to devastate organized labor in our country. The wind, and again, I had my own problem with the oil, but I decided I could not empower big oil to overcome the successes in this bill. The wind and solar tax credits we added to the omnibus will eliminate about 10 times more carbon pollution than the export of crude oil will add. Of course, the omnibus was a compromise, but under Nita's leadership, we came a long way. It is a monumental improvement over the special interest-ridden appropriation bills that House Republicans were offering this year. This is a big win for America's working families. I'm very proud of the big vote that we had from our members once they saw what was actually in the bill. With that, I'm pleased to yield to our distinguished whip, who played such a big role in that big vote, Mr. Hoyer.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Leader. The big role, of course, was played in putting the bill together. And as Leader Pelosi has said, it was a win for the American people. Was it perfect? I said on the floor it wasn't perfect. We don't pass perfect bills. We pass bills that are reached through compromise, through the democratic process. But this was an extraordinarily big victory, in my opinion, as I said, for the American people. And I want to congratulate Leader Pelosi. I want to congratulate Ranking Member Lowy, who both worked. I know I was on the phone with them a lot, so I know that they were working
All right, guys, we're
around
going
the
to cut
clock.
out of this because we're getting live aerials from Freehold, New Jersey, where an AMC theater has been evacuated. I don't have any details other than that right now. I'm going to work to get you guys information. We do know that a theater has been evacuated in Freehold, New Jersey. Obviously, today is a big day in movie theaters because of the release of Episode 7, Star Wars. Big day, in case you haven't heard about it, which I feel like it's impossible to not hear about it. Gonna get to do some research and try to figure out what this is all about, guys. Live aerials coming in from New Jersey. Well, it looks like the scene has pretty much wrapped up. We know that people watching the new Star Wars Force Awakens movie were asked to leave the theater after a threat this morning, according to a news report and Twitter users. The evacuation came in just before noon New Jersey time, so about 10 here. Happened almost an hour and a half ago. Looks like Chopper has left, so we're going to go back to the Democrats' press conference.
Riders, not just poison pills, but that would undermine the health and safety and security of our country. I want to join in wishing, as I close, all Americans, especially those serving our nation overseas and their families, a joyous holiday season and Happy New Year. And now I want to yield to the Assistant Leader, my friend Jim Clyburn of South Carolina.
On your right side today. Thank you very much for yielding me the time. I want to add my voice to wishing all Americans a happy holiday season, hopefully a prosperous new year for us all. I also want to congratulate this leadership team. Leader Pelosi, it's just a fantastic job. In fact, I turned my phone off around 11:30 last night, but I want to thank her for the tremendous work she did on this. Thank you so much, Leader Laureate. Of course, we are, so I had some real battles with Rosa DeLauro. But we're here today, I think, to celebrate a very, very successful effort, a very good bill. I'm particularly impressed with this legislation in that it has restored significant funding to NIH, the National Institutes of Health. I think that all of us know that research is very, very important to all Americans, and I would dare say there's not a single family in our great country that will not stand to benefit from the tremendous work that will be made possible by by this legislation. I represent 2 research institutions. I'm also particularly impressed with the significant help given to historically black colleges and universities. I represent 7 historically black colleges and universities in my state, and I'm very pleased with what has gone toward their efforts. Now, I have some disappointments like everybody else. I do believe that lifting the cap on crude oil, the exporting of crude oil, is problematic. And I emphasize the fact that the opposition is not to the exporting of oil, but the exporting of crude oil, which means the refining that would ordinarily take place in this country and create jobs and maintain jobs will be lost. There'll be significant loss with that. And so I'm disappointed in that. And I'm very disappointed that we did not do enough for what I call targeted funding. And I'm pleased that Speaker Ryan and Leader Pelosi have gotten together on this issue. And the first of the year, we are going to have some serious discussions about what to do about these persistent poverty counties in our country, because although we are now seeing a rise projected in the interest rates, meaning that the Fed is impressed that the economy is recovering. The fact of the matter, though, there are a lot of communities that have not felt it yet, and until we begin targeting resources into these communities, we are going to be challenged. So we still have a lot of work to do when we get back after the holiday season is over. I hope that we can do so and begin 2016 in the same bipartisan fashion that we'll close in 2015, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to get that done. And with that, I would like to yield to the ranking member on appropriations and congratulate her for a job well done. You're the laureate.
Well, I must say it's a delight to be here today. And it's been a long month as we were working across the aisle. But first, I just want to thank our fearless leader, because for me, it's a real privilege to work with Nancy Pelosi. We've been in the Congress together a very, very long time and fought many battles, but to have Nancy Pelosi as our leader really made a tremendous difference as we came to the finish line. And I want to thank all the members of the leadership team, especially my friend Rosa DeLauro, who's been part of our our team for so many years and was responsible for the Labor Health Human Service Bill, which means so much to children, families across the country, whether it's education, whether it's health care, whether it's community centers. And NIH was mentioned before. I am so proud of the tremendous investment we have made and we will make in the National Institutes of Health. In our communities, we have people who depend on this, whether they suffer from cancer or Alzheimer's or autism or heart disease. The research of the National Institutes of Health is critical, and we can be so proud of that effort. Let me just say this. When you're working across the aisle, you don't always get everything you want. And if we were in the majority, we may got even more than we wanted. But it was a real strong bipartisan effort. And I was particularly pleased in these negotiations that we were able to get rid of 150 poison pills that were anti-environment, anti-women, anti-health, anti-education. I can go on. And that was a struggle, but we were able to do it as a team. So let me just say in conclusion, 9/11. Carol Maloney had done an amazing job. And of course, Jerry, what an amazing... Jerry Nather over here, and Joe Crowley. You can all see him, I know. But it was really a team effort, especially for those of us who are New Yorkers. I'll never forget 9/11. And as we sloshed in our boots and we talked to firefighters who were fortunate enough to survive, and police, and all the public servants that worked on 9/11, I will never, ever forget it. And so we fought together as a team very hard to get that funding, because many of the police who were lucky enough to live and the firefighters are suffering from a whole variety of illnesses. We owe them so much. And I want to thank you. And thank you, Jerry. Maybe John Stewart had a little bit to do with it, too. But you've been working so hard, so I want to thank our leader again for your leadership. Working with you is an honor. Excuse me, my dear. Thank you very much, Nita Lowy, our ranking member on appropriations. As she mentioned, Congresswoman DeLauro, the leader of on our side on the Labor, H, and Human Services Committee, this $2 billion additional for the National Institutes of Health is remarkable. It's almost miraculous, the power to cure that they have. And when you see opportunity that science presents to us, we have a responsibility to respond with the resources. So I wanted to acknowledge who was here with us, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who has been mentioned, our member of the leadership, Mr. Ben Ray Lujan, member of the leadership, Steve Israel, also an appropriator and on the committee fighting for the 9/11 initiative to pass. It was unfortunate that we had to find the money to pay for it when they were giving away tax breaks to the tune of almost $700 billion unpaid for. But nonetheless, that's another subject. Thank you, Steve. Member of leadership, Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland, important part of a strong vote we had today. Joe Crowley, a fighter for 9/11, personal as well as officially important to him. And as has been mentioned on the 9/11, Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler have been relentless, along with Steve Israel, Joe Crowley, and Nita Lowy, and all the members of the New York delegation, some of others who are on the Appropriations Committee. So thank you for your leadership in that. It was really a moral responsibility that we had. And when we passed it the first time, it was in a very different climate, with strong opposition from the Republicans and terrible rhetoric. They've come a long way, and we're glad of that, and we're appreciative of the strong bipartisan support for it. Now, there are two other issues, and then I will take some questions which my colleagues would be happy to answer. Some of you have asked earlier this morning and since the vote, what happened between yesterday and today? Well, there are three issues. Mr. Hoyer mentioned one of them, Puerto Rico. But we were not satisfied with what was in the bill. We tried to work late into tonight to get as much as we could. We're very pleased that the Speaker has made the commitment in public statement that he will have a legislation complete by March 31st, 2016. And also, what is new about it is that he has committed to having a hearing the first day back on this subject. On the subject of big oil, which was mentioned, and let me join Mr. Hoyer in commending Nydia Velasquez, Pedro Pergolisi, Jose Serrano, Mr. Gutierrez for their relentless leadership on this. I think Nydia Velasquez probably every minute of every day was on us to try to get something. I'm disappointed it's not in the bill. We tried till the end, but we have the Speaker's commitment, and we trust that this will all come to pass. In terms of the oil, one of the unfinished businesses of the bill is how we compensate, how we mitigate for the damage to domestic refineries. Mr. Clyburn said very clearly that we have no problem with refined oil leaving the country. It's crude because it carries with it the refinery jobs that should be here in America. There was an attempt in the bill to mitigate for the damage with a tax credit for some refineries, which is helpful in some parts of the country, but not in the Middle Atlantic and in the Northeast. And that's some unfinished business that we have to do. In terms of what I said about the renewables offsetting by 10 times the damage that lifting the ban on crude presented, we still have some unfinished business there because the bill, through a drafting error, did not include fuel cells, geothermal, and some other renewables that are part of that tax credit. And we have a commitment that will happen, an early revenue bill after the first of the year. So we're pleased with that. And then research has been mentioned over and over, but one element of research that we were disappointed, we couldn't get the ban lifted on research into gun violence, and we'll continue to work on that, as well as other initiatives to reduce gun violence in our country. But this would have been a small provision with massive consequences, but we couldn't get it. The NRA objected to our lifting the ban on research into gun violence. So that again, there's some other unfinished business, or that we have to work in the future. But these changes, especially that we have a prospect of success from the Speaker on refineries, on the further renewables, and on the Puerto Rico, I think we're in a good place to go forward. Not satisfied, but ready to work in a bipartisan way. And we wanted this bill to be bipartisan, so we didn't brag too much about what was in it too soon to lose the Republican votes. But again, we feel very, very good about what it is. I'm sure your more difficult questions would be, my colleagues would be ready to answer. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could kind of specifically go into, I mean, yesterday we were talking to members of leadership who were not expecting the vote to be this high. Specifically what happened, I know you kind of talked in broader terms, calls you made, how influential labor calls were, what happened, maybe Mr. Hoyer is also good for this question, but what specifically?
Well, I think one of the big differences was when the Appropriations Committee gave us in a serviceable form, because there was so much. Anita, would you speak to that?
I'm very pleased to answer that question, because this is a huge bill, $1.1 trillion. We're funding, as you know, education, health care, and there was some misunderstandings about what was in the bill and what wasn't in the bill. And so we were able to resolve it this morning, and working with my colleagues on appropriations, we were able to spread the facts. And as our leader said, there were many people who were very upset that the issues and that are very important to us and as part of our unfinished business hasn't been resolved regarding Puerto Rico. But the misunderstandings were key, and I'm glad we were able to get a huge number of votes.
The wins that we talked about this morning. Yeah, and
Sure.
you saw the list of Democratic wins. We had to make sure that members were looking at.
You know, let's remember that Nita and Rosa and I and others sat through months and months of Appropriations Committee hearings and markups where we were asked to swallow hundreds and hundreds of poison pill amendments. And Republicans would say, if we don't get these riders, we will just bring the whole government down. We will not have a budget. And what happened since then? We began with a bill that had all the bad stuff in and all the good stuff out, and we ended up with a bill today that has all the good stuff in and most of the bad stuff out. That's the definition of victory. That's the definition of victory. And what came out? GOP riders to inflict damage on the environment, on clean power plants, out. GOP riders with respect to a woman's right to get health care at Planned Parenthood, out. GOP riders hurting consumers by undermining the Financial Consumer Protection Board, out. GOP riders undermining the president with respect to negotiations on climate change, out. Everything that was a priority for them that they must have had in came out due to these negotiations. GOP riders to undermine campaign finance reform and transparency, out. So all the must-haves came out. And that's the result of the leadership of Nita Lowey, and it's the result of the shrewd negotiating strategy of Leader Pelosi.
Danny, did you want to speak to that?
Well, you've heard it. And I think what happened, Lauren, is that over the last 24 hours, members have had an opportunity to see the bill, understand what was in it, understand what was not in it. I think what you saw yesterday was an understandable disappointment that Puerto Rico was not in there, that some of the other things that we thought were important to be in there were not in there. But I think these are adult legislators, very bright people. I think the committee made it very clear and got out, as the leader said, an excellent document, said, look, we understand this is not 100%, but from our side, it's a 90% bill, and that's an A. I think what happened was over those 24 hours, members reflected upon what we did get. The glass was about 80% or 90% full, not half empty. I think yesterday it was half empty, today it was 90% full, and I think that resulted in the overwhelming vote that you saw.
I think that one of the most crucial pieces of it, though, was Labor HHS. Rosa, did you want to speak to how you promulgated to the members what was in there?
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. And again, what an honor it is to work with the leader and with my leader on the Appropriations Committee and my colleagues who are here. Keeping in mind, so many of you heard me over the last several months talk about Labor HHS, and that, in fact, with regard to the allocation, we were shortchanged. And we spoke loudly and clearly about that. But what happened, which was before yesterday and today, what happened with the leadership of Nita Lowey is that what we did was we fought for additional resources for Labor HHS, which allowed us to be able to do the $2 billion for the NIH without having to cannibalize other programs. And that plus up, which we were able to get in the last hours, again through Nita Lowey's leadership, what happened was we were able then to say yes to Head Start and more funding, yes to a community development block grants, yes to Promised Neighborhoods, yes to magnet schools, yes to antibiotic research. And that's the information, all of what is in that bill, which, as you all know, after defense, has the greatest claim and portfolio on resources and programming. And those of us who sit on the committee know that that subcommittee really focuses on people's lives and making our members understand the effect on people's lives, that we were able to succeed in getting those additional dollars and what it would mean for their communities. Let them swallow hard. It was very good to get that, but yeah, it was a compromise, and there were some things that you don't like, but there is no perfect piece of legislation. And what we were able to get through that leadership was the ability for people to go home and say to families, there are more Head Start slots. There's more for early childhood education. There's more for job training and more for antibiotic resistance so that we can save people's lives. That is what turned people around this morning to be able to, and last night, to be able to say, let's go, let's do it.
Any other questions? Any other comments from our colleagues? Joe, did you have something you want to say?
I would just say I've been fortunate to serve in the House elected leadership for the last 3 years. And of my 17 years here in the House, a good 13 of which have been in the minority, I've never witnessed the Democratic leadership exploit more effectively the leverage that they had. And I want to congratulate the entire leadership team, both the elected as well as the appointed leadership, pushing the buttons when they need to be pushed and holding back when they needed to as well. How we spoke about the negotiations moving forward, I think, was also important in terms of giving further leverage to our negotiators. Much has been talked about, I think, quite frankly and honestly, about the damage that our Republican colleagues wanted to do in this omnibus bill that was thwarted by the negotiation process led by Nita Lowey and our entire team. But I also just want to focus, one, on an issue that was included and one that wasn't. First, that wasn't. I think the issue of Puerto Rico and what the people there are going through in their government is something that affects not only Puerto Rico, but maybe no other part of the country outside of Puerto Rico more than New York City. We have so many people of Puerto Rican heritage within our great city, and our great city is what it is today because of their contributions. And to have this hanging over their head, especially head into the end of this year and into the new year. But I want to congratulate our leadership again in getting a commitment from the Speaker as well as the majority leader, that this will be taken up the first day we come back into session, and a commitment that something will be done to help the people of Puerto Rico dramatically between now and March 31st. And I hope, quite frankly, it doesn't take till March 31st that we do this immediately. And the other point I just want to make, and that is on the Zadroga Act, the 9/11 Health and Victims Compensation Act. I want to thank two people in particular, Jerry Nadler, whose district this took place in, the attack took place in, and Carolyn Maloney, both of whose efforts have been outstanding, the entire tri-state region, and all the members of a Democratic caucus, and many within the Republican caucus as well, and seeing to it that that commitment that was made was followed through on. This is a this is not a Christmas present or a holiday present. Quite frankly, this was owed, a debt owed to these men and women. That it took this long, well, you know, I don't want to look back and look on the negative end. The fact is it's getting done. And tens of thousands of people who are suffering today, many from incurable diseases, as a result of the exposure that they had on the pile after 9/11, they can have some peace of mind and rest knowing that they will have all the health care they need to survive as long as they possibly can, and that the needs of their families will be met. And it's because, quite frankly, because of the men and women standing around me today, I think, more than anyone else. So thank you all very much. And happy holidays.
Donna Edwards, member, co-chair of our Steering and Policy Committee.
Thank you. And I want to say first thank you to Leader Pelosi. She really is fearless and has been throughout this process. And Nita Lowey, without your leadership on as the ranking member, we wouldn't have been able to see the details. Now, I'm not an appropriator. I didn't sit down in all of those markups and meetings. And even up until early this morning, I was leaning against voting for the omnibus. But when my colleagues and our leadership team really spelled out for all of us, I think particularly for members of the Congressional Black Caucus, the details of what was in the omnibus and the value that is going to come back to each and every one of our communities, it became incredibly clear that the list of wins outweighs the list of negatives, and that begged for a yes vote. And so I'm just very proud of what we've done. Now, we still have work to do. I mean, there are priorities, for example, of the Congressional Black Caucus that were expressed yesterday and into today around the funding of historically black colleges and universities. And thanks to Rosa DeLaura's leadership and others, we can really see pluses in the funding for historically black colleges and universities, but we need to do more. And the way to do more, frankly, is for Democrats to be in the majority. And so that's the next big picture. And the fact is, though, that for promised neighborhoods, for education, for Head Start, for community development block grants, for research funding, all of those list of positives, and then the plus up in funding for historically black colleges and universities. I'm very proud of what we've done here today. It is a down payment on what we need to do for the American people, and that down payment will come and be fulfilled in November of 2016. Thank you.
Mr. Ben.
Yeah, he does. Yes. Remember the one that did the summer? Oh, yeah. He's watching Star Wars.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Do you think he was being sarcastic, like that was a jab at
Yes. Okay. It's a dangerous game you're
I
playing.
know. It all end badly.
Maybe they'll like each other.
To San Bernardino. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I'm not hearing myself anymore. Yeah.
2-minute warning. So we have our answer. That's right, Gretchen, and good afternoon. We should see the president in about 90 seconds. In addition to the subjects that you just discussed with my colleague Brett Baer, we should also expect to see the president questioned on these new disclosures from a former member of his own war cabinet, former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, giving his first substantive interview since he was forced out of his job by the White House after less than a year on the job this past February. Hagel, like other former officials, former aides to the president, painting a picture of a White House that has sometimes made critical national security decisions on the basis of political considerations. But that's just one piece of the larger puzzle of counterterrorism and national security involving the larger struggle against ISIS that we expect to see the commander-in-chief questioned on here in this news conference, set to start just a few seconds from now. Gretchen.
Take control of the narrative here. Look, it's always difficult in the last year of a second term for a president to stay relevant, but the White House thinks they have a good story to tell. The opening on Cuba, the deals on
That's right. We can also expect to hear about his plans perhaps to visit Cuba in his final year in office, and also perhaps about the Supreme Court victory he scored when same-sex marriage was upheld by a majority of the justices, Gretchen. I have some early indications that I probably will not be called on, but if honored with the opportunity, I've got some fastballs ready to go. You can bet. Typically, they last about an hour. Given the way this president answers questions, that means we can probably only expect about 7 or 8 or 9 questions, but we're expecting him any moment. And we are always leery of talking over the president or while he's on his way into the room. So I think probably we'll toss it back to you. Thank you.
And look forward to things that he thinks he can get accomplished this year, including criminal justice reform and
the idea of banning assault weapons. Really quite extraordinary given the more gun control legislation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Clearly, this is not the most important event that's taking place in the White House today. There is a screening of Star Wars for Gold Star families and children coming up, so I'll try to be relatively succinct. Let me say a few words about the year behind us and the year ahead, and then I'll take a few questions. As I look back on this year, one thing I see is that so much of our steady, persistent work over the years is paying off for the American people in big, tangible ways. Our early actions to rescue the economy set the stage for the longest streak of private sector job growth on record, with 13.7 million new jobs in that time. The unemployment rate has been cut in half, down to 5%. And most importantly, wages grew faster than at any time since the recovery began. So over the course of this year, a lot of the decisions that we made early on have paid off. Years of steady implementation of the Affordable Care Act helped to drive the rate of the uninsured in America below 10% for the first time since records were kept on that. Healthcare prices have grown at their lowest level in 5 decades. 17 million more Americans have gained coverage, and we now know that 6 million people have signed up through healthcare.gov for coverage beginning on January 1st, 600,000 on Tuesday alone. New customers are up 1/3 over last year, and the more who sign up, the stronger the system becomes. And that's good news for every American who no longer has to worry about being just one illness or accident away from financial hardship. On climate, our early investment in clean energy ignited a clean energy industry boom. Our actions to help reduce our carbon emissions brought China to the table, and last week in Paris, nearly 200 nations forged a historic agreement that was only possible because of American leadership. Around the world, from reaching the deal to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, to reestablishing diplomatic relations with Cuba, to concluding a landmark trade agreement that will make sure that American workers and American businesses are operating on a level playing field, and that we, rather than China or other countries, are setting the rules for global trade. We have shown what is possible when America leads. And after decades of dedicated advocacy, marriage equality became a reality in all 50 states. So I just want to point out, I said at the beginning of this year that interesting stuff happens in the fourth quarter, and we are only halfway through. I do want to thank Congress for ending the year on a high note. I got to sign an education bill that is going to fix some of the challenges that we had with No Child Left Behind, and promises to invest more in high-quality early childhood education. We signed a transportation bill that, although not as robust as I think we need, still allows states and local governments to plan and actually get moving, putting people back to work, rebuilding our roads and our bridges. We got Ex-Im Bank back to work, supporting American exports. And today they passed a bipartisan budget deal. I'm not wild about everything in it. I'm sure that's true for everybody, but it is a budget that, as I insisted, invests in our military and our middle class without ideological provisions that would have weakened Wall Street reform or rules on big polluters. It's part of an agreement that will permanently extend tax credits to 24 million working families. It includes some long-sought wins like strengthening America's leadership at the IMF. And because it eliminates the possibility of a shutdown for the first time, or for the first 9 months of next year, Congress and I have a long runway to get some important things done on behalf of the American people. Now, there's still a lot of work to do. For example, there's still a lot more that Congress can do to promote job growth and increase wages in this country. I still want to work with Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, to reform our criminal justice system. And earlier today I commuted the sentences of 95 men and women who had served their debt to society, another step forward in upholding our fundamental ideals of justice and fairness. And of course, our most important job is to keep Americans safe. I've had a lot to say about that this week, but let me reiterate. The United States continues to lead a global coalition in our mission to destroy ISIL. ISIL's already lost about 40% of the populated areas it once controlled in Iraq, and it's losing territory in Syria. As we keep up the pressure, our air campaign will continue to hit ISIL harder than ever, taking out their leaders, their commanders, and their forces. We're stepping up our support for partners on the ground as they push ISIL back. Our men and women in uniform are carrying out their mission with trademark professionalism and courage. And this holiday season, all of us are united in our gratitude for their service, and we are thankful to their families as well, because they serve alongside those who are actually deployed. Now, squeezing ISIL's heart, its core in Syria and Iraq, will make it harder for them to pump their terror and propaganda to the rest of the world. At the same time, as we know from San Bernardino, where I'll visit with families later today, we have to remain vigilant here at home. Our counterterrorism, intelligence, homeland security, and law enforcement communities are working 24/7 to protect our homeland, and all of us can do our part by staying vigilant, by saying something if we see something that is suspicious, by refusing to be terrorized, and by staying united as one American family. In short, for all the very real progress America's made over the past 7 years, we still have some unfinished business, and I plan on doing everything I can with every minute of every day that I have left as president to deliver on behalf of the American people. Since taking this office, I've never been more optimistic about a year ahead than I am right now, and in 2016 I'm going to leave it out all on the field. So, with that, let me take some questions. I'll start with Roberta Rampton of Reuters.
Mr. President, you're going to California today, and as you said earlier this week, you told the nation that there's no specific or credible threat of a similar attack. But how is it really possible to know? I mean, aren't similar plots going to be just as hard to detect beforehand? And some lawmakers are saying that your government should review the social media of all people applying for visas to come to this country. What do you think of that idea? Should that be mandatory?
Well, Roberta, you're absolutely right that it is very difficult for us to detect lone wolf plots or plots involving a husband and wife in this case, because despite the incredible vigilance and professionalism of all our law enforcement, Homeland Security, et cetera, it's not that different from us trying to detect the next mass shooter. You don't always see it. They're not always communicating publicly, and if you're not catching what they say publicly, then it becomes a challenge. We are continuing to work at every level to make sure that there's no slip between information sharing among agencies. We're continuing to strengthen our information sharing with foreign countries, and because in part of the tragedy in Paris, I think you're seeing much greater cooperation from our European partners on these issues. But this is a different kind of challenge than the sort that we had with an organization like Al-Qaeda that involved highly trained operatives who are working as cells or as a network. Here, essentially, you have ISIL trying to encourage or induce somebody who may be prey to this kind of propaganda, and it becomes more difficult to see. It does mean that they're less likely to be able to carry out large, complex attacks, but as we saw in San Bernardino, obviously, you can still do enormous damage. The issue of reviewing social media for those who are obtaining visas, I think may have gotten garbled a little bit because there may be it's important to distinguish between posts that are public, social media on a Facebook page, versus private communications through various social media or apps. And our law enforcement and intelligence professionals are constantly monitoring public posts, and that is part of the visa review process, that people are investigating what individuals have said publicly and questioned about any statements that they may be made. But if you have a private communications between two individuals, that's harder to discern by definition. And one of the things we'll be doing is engaging with the high-tech community to find out how we can, in an appropriate way, do a better job if we have a lead to be able to track a suspected terrorist. But we're going to have to recognize that no government is going to have the capacity to read every single person's text or emails or social media. If it's not posted publicly, then there are going to be feasibility issues that are probably insurmountable at some level, and it raises questions about our values. I mean, keep in mind it was only a couple of years ago where we were having a major debate about whether the government was becoming too much like Big Brother. And overall, I think we've struck the right balance in protecting civil liberties and making sure that U.S. citizens' privacy is preserved, that we are making sure that there's oversight to what our intelligence agencies do. But we're going to have to continue to balance our needs for security with people's legitimate concerns about privacy. And because the internet is global and communication systems are global, the values that we apply here oftentimes are ones that you know, folks who are trying to come into the country are also benefiting from, because they're using the same technologies. But this is precisely why we're working very hard to bring law enforcement, intelligence, and high-tech companies together, because we're going to have to really review what we can do both technically as well as consistent with our laws and our values in order to try to discern more rapidly some of the potential threats that may be out there. Okay. David Jackson.
Mr. President, a Gitmo question. Congress has made it pretty clear that they're just not going to let you transfer prisoners to the United States for trial. But some people think you already have the executive authority to transfer those prisoners and close Gitmo itself next year. My question is, do you believe you have that authority, and are you willing to exercise it to close that place?
Well, first of all, we've been working systematically, another example of persistence, in reducing the population. We have a review process. Those who are eligible for transfer, we locate in countries that have accepted some of these detainees. They monitor them, and it's been determined that they can be transferred. And my expectation is by early next year, we should have reduced that population below 100. And we will continue to steadily chip away at the numbers in Guantanamo. There's going to come to a point where we have an irreducible population, people who pose a significant threat, but for various reasons it's difficult for us to try them in an Article III court. Some of those folks are going through the military commission process, but there's going to be a challenge there. Now, at that stage, I'm presenting a plan to Congress about how we can close Guantanamo. I'm not going to automatically assume that Congress says no. I'm not being coy, David. I think it's fair to say that there's going to be significant resistance from some quarters to that. But I think we can make a very strong argument that it doesn't make sense for us to be spending an extra $100, $200, $300, $500 million, $1 billion, to have a secure setting for 50, 60, 70 people. And we will wait until Congress has definitively said no to a well-thought-out plan with numbers attached to it before we say anything definitive about my executive authority here. I think it's far preferable if I can get stuff done with Congress. David, as I said before, and I think you've seen me on a whole bunch of issues like immigration. I'm not going to be forward-leaning on what I can do without Congress before I've tested what I can do with Congress. And every once in a while they'll surprise you. And this may be one of those places, because I think we can make a really strong argument. Guantanamo continues to be one of the key magnets for jihadi recruitment. To Roberta's question earlier about how do they propagandize and convince somebody here in the United States who may not have a criminal record or a history of terrorist activity to start shooting. This is part of what they feed, this notion of a gross injustice, that America's not living up to its professed ideals. We know that. We see the internet traffic. We see how Guantanamo has been used to create this mythology that America is at war with Islam. And for us to close it is part of our counterterrorism strategy that is supported by our military, our diplomatic, and our intelligence teams. So when you combine that with the fact that it's really expensive, that we are essentially at this point detaining a handful of people, and each person is costing several $1 million to detain, when there are more efficient ways of doing it, I think we can make a strong argument. But I'll take, I'll take your point that it'll be an uphill battle. Every battle I've had with Congress over the last 5 years has been uphill, but we keep on surprising you by actually getting some stuff done.
On an immigration,
Sometimes that may prove necessary, but we try not to get out ahead of ourselves on that. Julie Pace.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about some of the broader challenges in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Some of the Republicans who are running for president have argued that the Mideast and the United States would be safer if you hadn't had regime change in places like Iraq, Libya, and Egypt. And having gone through the experience of the Arab Spring and the aftermath, I wonder what you now see the U.S. role in the Middle East in terms of trying to push dictators out of power. Would you advise future presidents to call for authoritarian leaders to step down, as you did? And just specifically on Syria, at this point, is it your expectation that Bashar Assad's presidency will outlast yours?
There's been a lot of revisionist history, sometimes by the same people, making different arguments depending on the situation. So maybe it's useful just for us to go back over some of these issues. We did not depose Hosni Mubarak. Millions of Egyptians did because of their dissatisfaction with the corruption and authoritarianism of the regime. We had a working relationship with Mubarak. We didn't trigger the Arab Spring. And the notion that somehow the U.S. was in a position to pull the strings on a country that is the largest in the Arab world, I think is mistaken. What is true is that at the point at which the choice becomes mowing down millions of people or trying to find some transition, we believed, and I would still argue, that it was more sensible for us to find a peaceful transition to the Egyptian situation. With respect to Libya, Libya is sort of a alternative version of Syria in some ways, because by the time the international coalition interceded in Syria, chaos had already broken out. You already had the makings of a civil war. You had a dictator who was threatening and was in a position to carry out the wholesale slaughter of large numbers of people. And we worked under UN mandate with a coalition of folks in order to try to avert a big humanitarian catastrophe that would not have been good for us. Those who now argue, in retrospect, we should have left Gaddafi in there, seem to forget that he had already lost legitimacy and control of his country, and we could have, instead of what we have in Libya now, we could have had another Syria in Libya now. The problem with Libya was the fact that there was a failure on the part of the entire international community, and I think that the United States has some accountability for not moving swiftly enough and underestimating the need to rebuild government there quickly. And as a consequence, you now have a very bad situation. And as far as Syria goes, I think it is entirely right and proper for the United States of America to speak out on behalf of its values. And when you have an authoritarian leader that is killing hundreds of thousands of his own people, the notion that we would just stand by and say nothing is contrary to who we are. And that does not serve our interests, because at that point, us being in collusion with that kind of governance would make us even more of a target for terrorist activity.
If that government can help try to stop extremists from building up in their countries.
The reason that Assad has been a problem in Syria is because that is a majority Sunni country, and he had lost the space that he had early on to execute an inclusive transition, peaceful transition. He chose instead to slaughter people. And once that happened, the idea that a minority population there could somehow crush tens of millions of people who oppose him is not feasible. It's not plausible. Even if you were being cold-eyed and hard-hearted about the human toll there, it just wouldn't happen. And as a consequence, our view has been that you cannot bring peace to Syria, you cannot get an end to the civil war unless you have a government that is recognized as legitimate by a majority of that country. It will not happen. And this is the argument that I've had repeatedly with Mr. Putin, dating 5 years ago, at which time his suggestion, as I gather some Republicans are now suggesting, was, you know, Assad's not so bad. Let him just be as brutal and repressive as he can, but at least he'll keep order. And I said, look, the problem is that the history of trying to keep order when a large majority of the country has turned against you is not good. And 5 years later, I was right. So we now have an opportunity, and John Kerry is meeting as we speak with Syria and Turkey and Iran and the Gulf countries and other parties who are interested. We now have an opportunity not to turn back the clock. It's going to be very difficult to completely overcome the devastation that's happened in Syria already, but to find a political transition that maintains the Syrian state, that recognizes there are a bunch of stakeholders inside of Syria, and hopefully to initiate a ceasefire that won't be perfect but allows all the parties to turn on what should be our number one focus, and that is destroying Daesh and its allies in the region. And that is going to be a difficult process. It's going to be a painstaking process, but there is no shortcut to that. And that's not based on some idealism on my part. That's a hard-headed calculation about what's going to be required to get the job done.
Do you think that Assad, though, potentially could remain in power a year from now?
I think that Assad is going to have to leave in order for the country to stop the bloodletting and for all the parties involved to be able to move forward in a non-sectarian way. He has lost legitimacy in the eyes of a large majority of the country. Now, is there a way of us constructing a bridge, creating a political transition that allows those who are allied with Assad right now, allows the Russians, allows the Iranians to ensure that their equities are respected, that minorities like the Alawites are not crushed or retribution is not the order of the day. I think that's going to be very important as well. And that's what makes this so difficult. Sadly, had Assad made a decision earlier that he was not more important personally than his entire country, that kind of political transition would have been much easier. It's a lot harder now. But John Kerry's been doing some excellent work in moving that process forward, and I do think that you've seen from the Russians a recognition that after a couple of months, they're not really moving the needle that much, despite a sizable deployment inside of Syria. And of course, that's what I suggested would happen, because there's only so much bombing you can do when an entire country is outraged and believes that its ruler doesn't represent them. Cheryl Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask you about the surprising Congress. Specifically, what are your top legislative priorities for next year? And how has the new speaker, Paul Ryan, changed the dynamic with you and Capitol Hill? And can you be more ambitious next year, doing things like maybe completing the transatlantic trade partnership or even getting tax reform?
Well, first of all, it's important to give some credit where credit is due. John Boehner did a favor to all of us, including now Speaker Ryan, by working with us to agree on a top-line budget framework. That was the basis for subsequent negotiations. He was able to do that because he was going out the door, and was then given, I think, a little more room to maneuver than he previously had. Having said that, I also want to give Speaker Ryan credit. I called both him and Mitch McConnell, as well as Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, for the orderly way in which they actually negotiated a budget, the way Congress is historically and typically supposed to work. I mean, we've gotten kind of used to last-minute crises and shutdown threats and so forth, and this is a messy process that doesn't satisfy everybody completely, but it's more typical of American democracy. And I think that Speaker Ryan deserves a role in that. I will say that in his interactions with me, he has been professional. He has reached out to tell me what he can do and what he cannot do. I think it's a good working relationship. We recognize that we disagree on a whole bunch of other stuff and have fundamentally different visions for where we want to move the country. But perhaps because even before he was elected, he had worked on Capitol Hill, I think he is respectful of the process and respectful of how legislation works. So kudos to him, as well as all the leaders and appropriators who are involved in this process. Now, just want to repeat, because sometimes we take for granted what's happened. I said early on in this process that I wasn't going to sign a budget that that did not relieve sequester, this artificial austerity that was making it difficult for us to invest in things like education and our military. And I said I would not accept a lot of ideological riders that were attached to a big budget deal. And we met our goals. And because of some terrific negotiations by the Democrats up on Capitol Hill, and I think some pretty good work by our legislative staffs here, we're going to be able to fund environmental protection. We're going to be able to make sure that we're investing in things like early childhood education and making college more affordable. We're going to be able to implement the clean power plant rule. We're going to be able to continue to invest in clean energy that spurs on innovation. We're going to be able to make sure that our military gets the equipment and the training that it needs in order to be effective in fighting ISIL and other threats around the world. So it was a good win, and there's some things in there that I don't like, but that's the nature of legislation and compromise, and I think the system worked. That gives me some optimism that next year, on a narrow set of issues, we can get some more work done. Now, as David said, it's an election year, and obviously a lot of the legislative process is going to be skewed by people looking over their shoulders, worrying about primary, trying to position themselves relative to the presidential candidates. So that makes it harder. But I think there are going to be a handful of areas where we can make real progress. One of them you already mentioned, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which now has been out. Congress has had a chance to review, and it meets the bar that I set. It is consistent with what I promised, which is the most pro-labor, pro-environment, progressive trade deal in history that eliminates just about every tariff on American manufacturing goods in countries that up until this point have charged a tax essentially on anything that American workers, American businesses sell in these areas. It brings those taxes down to zero on basically all of American manufactured products. A huge win for agriculture, because now, you know, the people of Japan are going to be in a better position to enjoy American beef and American pork, which up until this point, even though we're much more efficient producers, has been tagged with a tax that makes you know, our products uncompetitive in Japanese markets. So this is a big deal, and I think Speaker Ryan would like to try to get it done. And there are both proponents and opponents of this in both Democratic and Republican parties, and so it's going to be an interesting situation where we're going to have to stitch together the same kind of bipartisan effort in order for us to get it done. A second area that I think is possible is criminal justice reform. There has been sincere, serious negotiations and efforts by Democrats and Republicans to create a criminal justice system that is more fair, more even-handed, more proportionate, and is smarter about how we reduce crime. And I've really been impressed by the dedication of a core group of Democrats and Republicans, some of them the most liberal Democrats and the most conservative Republicans coming together saying this is the right thing to do. We've got a good bill in the Senate that passed with bipartisan support out of committee. My hope is that that gets to the floor and that we can pair it up with a good bill out of the House. And this is an area where you potentially can see us save money, reduce recidivism, you know, make sure that people who make a mistake on nonviolent crimes have to pay the price, have to serve time, but are released in a reasonable fashion, that they have more support so that they're less likely to go back into the criminal system subsequently. And that's an area where I think we may be able to make a big difference. So those are just two examples. We'll keep on looking for a number of examples like that. And wherever there's an opportunity, I'm going to take it. Okay. Philip Crowder. Philip Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned climate change already, and at the time of the signing of the deal in Paris, you said it was potentially a turning point for the world. But this was a deal that is not a legally binding document, and you bypassed Congress pretty much completely. Are you worried at this point that a Republican president who might take over from you in the White House could stop the deal in its tracks entirely? And considering that possibility, are you more interested in campaigning for a Democratic nominee, considering that danger?
I think it's fair. I was going to be campaigning for a Democratic nominee, even without that danger. And I am very confident that we're going to have a terrific Democratic nominee. And whose phone is that, guys? Come on now. Somebody, you recognize your ring. Don't be embarrassed. Just turn it off. Huh? There you go. Okay. Can I still hear it? All right, I think it's off now. I think we will have a strong Democratic nominee. I think that Democratic nominee will win. I think I will have a Democratic successor. And I will campaign very hard to make that happen for a whole variety of reasons, because they're far more likely to share my fundamental vision about where America should go. But having said that, what I think people should also feel good about is that the agreement struck in Paris, although not legally binding when it comes to the targets that have been set, does create this architecture in which all around the world countries are saying, this is where we're going. We're going to be chasing after this clean energy future. This is how we're going to meet our goals. We're going to double down on solar power. We're going to double down on wind power. We're going to invest more heavily in biofuels. We're going to figure out battery technologies. And what you saw in this budget, which I think was really significant, was an extension of the solar tax credits and wind tax credits that we had helped to really boost early on in my administration, and that it resulted in wind power increasing threefold, solar power increasing by 20-fold. Those tax credits are now going to be extended for 5 to 7 years. And as a consequence, that combination of market signals means that the private sector is going to start investing much more heavily. They know this is coming. And it's not just coming here, it's coming around the world. So you now have a global marketplace for clean energy that is stable and accelerating over the course of the next decade. That then creates a different dynamic that is independent of what Congress does, but also helps to shape what Congress does. Because the more people that are now getting jobs in solar installation and production, the more that you have companies who are seeing how American innovation can sell products in clean energy all across the Asia Pacific and in Europe and in Africa. Suddenly there's a big monetary incentive to getting this right. And that's been the history of environmental progress in this country, and now we've exported it around the world. Every time we've made a decision, you know what, we're going to have clean air. The predictions were everything would fall apart. And lo and behold, turns out that American innovation makes getting clean air a lot less expensive than people expected, and it happens a lot faster than expected. When we made a decision that we were going to double fuel efficiency standards on cars, everybody said, oh, this is going to ruin the American auto industry. The American auto industry has been booming over the last couple of years. Acid rain, when George H.W. Bush instituted a system to charge for the emissions that were causing acid rain, everybody said, well, you can't do that. That's going to ruin business. And it turned out it was smoother, faster, quicker, better. And acid rain, folks who were born, I don't know, some of you reporters are getting younger than, or I'm getting older, may not remember it, but that was a big deal. Now, most folks don't even remember it anymore because it got solved. And there's no reason why the same won't happen here. Now, do I think that there's going to be a lot of noise and campaigning next year about how we're going to stop Paris in its tracks? There will probably be a lot of noise like that. Do I actually think that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, even Republican members of Congress are going to look at it and say that's a smart thing to do? I don't think they will. Keep in mind that right now, the American Republican Party is the only major party that I can think of in the advanced world that effectively denies climate change. I mean, it's an outlier. Many of the key signatories to this deal, the architects of this deal, come from center-right governments. Even the far-right parties in many of these countries, they may not like immigrants, for example, but they admit, yeah, the science tells us we got to do something about climate change. So my sense is that this is something that may be an advantage in terms of short-term politics in a Republican primary. It's not something that is going to be a winner for Republicans long-term.
You mentioned American leadership. Is it embarrassing to you that the other party denies climate change?
No, it's because first of all, I'm not a member of that party. Second of all, it didn't stop us from being the key leader in getting this done. I mean, this is something I've been working on now for 5-6 years. When I went to Copenhagen, I essentially engaged in 24 hours of diplomacy to salvage from a pretty chaotic process, the basic principle that all countries had to participate, that we couldn't have a rigid division between developed countries and developing countries when it came to solving this problem. That was the initial foundation for us then working with other countries, culminating in the joint announcement with China, bringing in India, bringing in Brazil and the other big emerging countries, working with the Europeans and getting this done. This would not have happened without American leadership. And by the way, the same is true for the Iran nuclear deal. The same is true for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The same is true for stamping out Ebola, something you guys may recall from last year, which was the potential end of the world. You know, at each juncture, what we've said is that American strength and American exceptionalism is not just a matter of us bombing somebody. More often, it's a matter of us convening, setting the agenda, pointing other nations in a direction that's good for everybody and good for U.S. interests, engaging in painstaking diplomacy, leading by example. And you know, sometimes the results don't come overnight. They don't come the following day, but they come. And this year, what you really saw was that steady, persistent leadership on many initiatives that I began when I first came into office. All right, I've got April Ryan.
Mr. President, I want to ask you something on criminal justice. Going back to something you said, and also something from Julie Pace. Your administration contends the United States has 5% of the world population, but 25% of the global jail population. What legislation are you supporting that significantly cuts mass incarceration in this country? And then going back to the Assad issue, does Assad have to go to defeat ISIS?
Well, we're going to defeat ISIS. And we're going to do so by systematically squeezing them, cutting off their supply lines, cutting off their financing, taking out their leadership, taking out their forces, taking out their infrastructure. We're going to do so in partnership with forces on the ground that sometimes are spotty, sometimes need capacity building, need our assistance, need our training, but we're seeing steadily progress in many of these areas. And so they're going to be on the run. Now, they are going to continue to be dangerous. So let me just be very clear, because whenever I say that we have made progress in squeezing the territory that they control or made real inroads against them, what people will say is, well, if something happens around the world, then obviously that must not be true. But in any battle, in any fight, even as you make progress, there's still dangers involved. And ISIL's capacity both to infiltrate Western countries with people who've traveled to Syria or traveled to Iraq, and the savviness of their social media, their ability to recruit disaffected individuals who may be French or British or even U.S. citizens, will continue to make them dangerous for quite some time. But we will systematically go after them. Now, in order for us to stamp them out thoroughly, we have to eliminate lawless areas in which they cannot still roam. So we can disable them, we can dismantle much of their infrastructure, greatly reduce the threat that they pose to the United States, our allies, and our neighbors. But in the same way that Al-Qaeda is pinned down and has much more difficulty carrying out any significant attacks because of how we've systematically dismantled them, they still pose a threat. There's still operatives who are interested in carrying out terrorist attacks because they still operate in areas between Pakistan and Afghanistan, or more prominently right now in Yemen, that are hard to reach, our long-term goal has to be able to stabilize these areas so that they don't have any safe haven. And in order for us to do that in Syria, there has to be an end to the civil war. And there has to be an actual government that has a police capacity and a structure in these areas that currently aren't governed. And it is my firm belief, and the belief of the experts in this administration, that so long as Assad is there, we cannot achieve that kind of stability inside of Syria. And you know, I think the history over the last several years indicates as much. So that's going to continue to be a top priority for us, moving aggressively on the military track and not letting ISIL take a breath and pounding away at them with our special forces and our airstrikes and the training and advising of partners who can go after them. But we also have to keep very aggressive on this diplomatic track in order for us to bring countries together. All right? Everybody? Oh, on criminal justice reform, I answered the question. I'm hopeful. Well, right. And April, what I said is that I strongly support the Senate legislation that's already been put forward. I'm hopeful that the House can come up with legislation that follows the same principles, which is to make sure that we're doing sentencing reform, but we're also doing a better job in terms of reducing recidivism and providing support for ex-offenders. And if we can get those two bills together in a conference, then I'm somewhat optimistic that we're going to be able to make a difference. Now, keep in mind, April, when you use the term mass incarceration, statistically, the overwhelming majority of people who are incarcerated are in state prisons and state facilities for state crimes. We can only focus on federal law and federal crimes. And so there's still going to be a large population of individuals who are incarcerated even for nonviolent drug crimes, because this is a trend that started in the late 80s and 90s and accelerated at the state levels. But if we can show at the federal level that we can be smart on crime, more cost effective, more just, more proportionate, then we can set a trend for other states to follow as well. And that's our hope. This is not going to be something that's reversed overnight. So just to go back to my general principle, April, it took 20 years for us to get to the point we are now. And it will be 20 years probably before we reverse some of these major trends. Okay, everybody, I got to get to Star Wars. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Happy New Year, Mr. President.
Happy New Year to you. Happy Diwali.
Nice to be from India, sir.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I want everybody have fun with your family.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yes, I do, Gretchen. Good afternoon from the James S. Brady press briefing room, where the president spoke for the better part of an hour, not quite a full hour. Took, as we predicted, fewer than 10 questions, none of them from the broadcast media, we might point out. The president's big news today, once again, was reiterating that the United States and its coalition partners will destroy ISIS, but he reminded Americans that that terror group will remain dangerous, and he said there will be setbacks as we make.
All right, folks, so that was President Obama's end of the year press conference wrapping up, as he will be heading to Hawaii for a 2-week vacation. Hope everyone is having just an awesome Friday. We do have some breaking news that I want to get to. A drone crash in the valley. Happened on a highway here. Let me get you some info here. Let me lower this because we don't want to hear this from the chopper. But Sky Fox is up right now. This is the 101 and Ray in Chandler, where police have confirmed that a drone was sailing over on the highway and it crashed, and apparently there is some debris, but Sky Fox just hasn't captured it yet. So maybe it's already been cleaned up here, but boy, as technology grows, so does these incidents of crashes with drones. So we'll get you caught up, guys, on all the latest news headlines. Looks like there's going to be a Ted Cruz event as well coming up. So we'll go to that once he comes out. But I just wanted to let you guys know of this situation that we are following. But Sky Fox just can't seem to locate the debris. But thank you all for watching Fox10Phoenix.com, part of the Fox 10 News Now. You're in the stream with me. I'm gonna be on for another half an hour, and then we're gonna take about a 30-minute break. Samia will be back. I'll be with you all evening as Kinsey is off today, starting her vacay up. And is that the drone, folks? What's going on? Let's see what's happening. You are watching Fox 10 News Now. Thank you all. Yep, my phone's ringing. Look at this. We got everything going on. All right, we'll monitor this situation. Looks like Ted Cruz event is starting. Looks like a press conference, so let's go to that now.
My pleasure. I'm glad I brought some cool weather.
Looks like Santa's here.
Wonderful thing. Yes, it is.
Your reindeer aren't happy with it.
No, they're not. No, they're not. But it's an extreme pleasure to be here, sir.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank
you. Merry Christmas, everyone. Welcome to our national fly-around. We are having an incredible trip across the Super Tuesday states. Yesterday, we had a tremendous rally in Las Vegas. We went from there to St. Paul, Minnesota, had a packed house, enormous enthusiasm in Minnesota. We're now in Virginia. We're headed to Georgia. We're going through the March 1st Super Tuesday states, and I'll tell you, the enthusiasm that we are seeing all across the country is really breathtaking. We are seeing conservatives uniting behind our campaign. We're seeing it in the early primary states. We're seeing it in Iowa, and New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and Nevada. But we're also seeing it throughout the March 1st Super Tuesday states and throughout the country. And from the beginning, this race has been very simple. If conservatives unite, we win. And conservatives are coming together. They're uniting behind our campaign. And that's why we're winning right now. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Senator Cruz, in an interview with CBS, Senator Rubio said, I'm missing the omnibus vote. Well, in essence, not voting for it is a vote against it. What's your reaction to that? And will you join Senator Paul's call for Senator Rubio to resign over missing votes?
Well, listen, I'm going to let Marco defend his own voting record. I can tell you I flew back to Washington, D.C. today to vote against this omnibus. I think this omnibus was a betrayal of the men and women who elected us. All across this country, people are frustrated out of their minds. They're frustrated because we keep winning elections as conservatives. And then Republican leaders keep advancing Barack Obama's agenda. This is stunning. This is $1 trillion deal, thousands of pages cut in the dark of night. It funds all of Obamacare. It funds all of executive amnesty. It funds all of Planned Parenthood. It does nothing to stop this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. It does nothing to stop President Obama and Hillary Clinton's indefensible plan to bring tens of thousands of Syrian refugees to America, even though the head of the FBI says they cannot vet those refugees to determine whether or not they're ISIS terrorists. And not only that, but it sets the stage for expanding by 200,000 low-skilled immigrants coming into this country, which are going to take away jobs and drive down wages for working-class men and women. This was a betrayal of the men and women who rose up in 2014 and gave us a majority. Now, it's Christmas time. So it was Republican leadership playing Santa Claus to the lobbyists in K Street and the special interest, and it's why people are fed up with the Washington cartel, with career politicians in both parties who get in bed with the lobbyists and special interest and grow and grow and grow government. You know, just this week, Senator Chuck Schumer was very candid about what happened. He said, Senator McConnell wants the Senate to work, and the only way for the Senate to work is for them to pass our agenda. Well, that's exactly what Republican leadership just did, is funded and passed Barack Obama's agenda. It's why people are so frustrated. But it's also why we are seeing so much enthusiasm in our campaign, as people understand Republican leadership in Congress is not going to turn this country around. They're not listening to us. The only way to turn this country around is with a strong, principled, proven conservative in the White House. And that's why so many people are unifying, so many conservatives, so many Americans fed up with Washington are unifying behind our campaign.
Senator, to become president, Ted Cruz, how are you going to convince your party that at a general election you can convince Americans to become president? That you're not too conservative.
The only way to win a general election is to bring back to the polls the millions of conservatives who stayed home in 2008 and 2012. Millions of evangelical Christians stayed home. Millions of Reagan Democrats stayed home. How do we win? We need to be the party of hard-working men and women, blue-collar workers, hard-working men and women that want to believe again in the promise of America. And we need to run against the bipartisan corruption of Washington, D.C. that Hillary Clinton embodies. That's how we win. I'll tell you, if you look at our base consists of the Reagan Democrats. It's the working men and women. It's the Ohio steel workers and the Michigan auto workers. It's the electricians and truck drivers and plumbers and the working men and women, the cops and firemen, the people with calluses on their hands who have gotten hammered for 7 years under the disastrous Obama-Clinton economy. They're frustrated. A great many working men and women stayed home. Part of why they stayed home in 08 and 12 is that Republicans had gotten in bed with Democrats on issues like amnesty. Amnesty is an issue that cuts right to the core of working men and women who want to have jobs, want to have decent wages. You know, we have right now today the lowest percentage of Americans working since 1977. Wages have stagnated. They're the same as they were 20 years ago. And people are fed up and they're tired of seeing Democrats and Washington establishment Republicans getting in bed together and acting as the water carriers for big business to allow more and more illegal immigration, allow more and more amnesty, drive down wages, cheap labor. Washington thinks is great for big business, but it's not great for the working men and women. And I will always fight for the working men and women of this country. That's how we win the general election.
I just heard Rush Limbaugh criticizing Donald Trump for criticizing you. So what's your reaction?
Listen, I love Rush Limbaugh. He is a powerful voice for freedom and conservative principles. And as it concerns Donald Trump's a friend of mine. There are an awful lot of folks in the media that want to see a cage match between me and Donald Trump. I think the Washington establishment is desperate for that battle. I have no interest in giving them what they want.
Senator has really been hammering you on immigration. I really don't understand how you could say that you never supported legalization. And a lot of people out there think that you are either playing the Washington game in, I was for it before I was against it, or can you explain how you were absolutely never against legalization?
Sure, Todd. It's very simple. I oppose amnesty. Marco Rubio supports amnesty. I oppose citizenship. Marco Rubio supports citizenship. I oppose legalization. Marco Rubio supports legalization. I opposed and led the fight to defeat the Gang of Eight bill. Marco Rubio authored and led the unsuccessful fight to pass the Gang of Eight bill. You know, if you go back to 2010 when Senator Rubio was running for Senate in Florida, he promised the men and women of Florida, if you elect me, he said, I will lead the fight against amnesty. That's what he told Floridians. Now, Todd, you'll remember in Texas, I promised the men and women of Texas the exact same thing. I said, if you elect me, I will lead the fight against amnesty. In 2013, there was, as Ronald Reagan would have put it, a time for choosing. Everyone had to choose which side of the line they stood on. Senator Rubio, unfortunately, made the decision not to honor the promises he made to the men and women who elected him. Instead, he decided to stand with Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and the big money interests in Washington and lead the fight to pass amnesty. And I made a very different decision. I made the decision to stand with Jeff Sessions and Steve King and the American people against amnesty to lead the fight to defeat the Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill.
But at the time, you said that you supported what you were pushing because it would legalize people in the country.
That is factually incorrect. That statement is false. And you know, back in 2013...
I mean, the tape's been playing on like endless loops for 2 days.
Back in 2013, the Rubio campaign believed it would benefit them politically if they broke their promises to the Florida voters and pushed amnesty. And presumably it was because they thought the big money donors in the Republican Party would reward them. Remember, that was back when Senator Rubio was on the cover of Time magazine, named the Savior. Well, they're regretting that decision now. They're wanting to run away from it. And yet facts are stubborn things. So what the Rubio campaign laughingly is pushing is I introduced a whole series of amendments to defeat the Rubio-Schumer amnesty plan. One of those amendments was an amendment that says nobody here illegally can ever be eligible for citizenship. It was a one-page amendment. It was a very simple amendment. It simply said no citizenship ever. What the Rubio campaign is spinning, and an awful lot of reporters are repeating unquestioningly, is that because I submitted that amendment to get rid of citizenship, that it means I supported the other aspects of the Gang of Eight. That's nonsense. And I would point out that supporting me in that fight for that citizenship amendment was Mike Lee and Jeff Sessions. I'm not aware of anyone who is putting forth the ludicrous claim that Jeff Sessions was somehow supporting legalization. Jeff and my positions were identical on this. And even more fundamentally, it worked. You remember back in 2013 how triumphant Senator Rubio, Senator Schumer, President Obama were. They were going on TV saying, we've got the votes to push this through the Senate. We've got the votes. Republican leadership in the House is going to take it up. We're going to pass it. They were convinced of that. And a handful of us, and it was a lonely handful in the Senate, led the fight against it. Jeff Sessions and I both stood on the Senate floor, were assailed from all directions. I spent 30 minutes on the radio with Rush Limbaugh. The question a minute ago was about Rush Limbaugh. During that half-hour Rush Limbaugh interview, the phones on Capitol Hill erupted as people across this country lit up the phones, and we turned the debate. The amendment on citizenship was very simple. To use a poker analogy, yesterday I was in Las Vegas. To use a poker analogy, what we did is we called their bluff. We called the bluff of the Democrats and the establishment Republicans who were pushing it. They claimed it was about the immigrants. This was always about partisan politics. You know, the new politically correct term, it's no longer illegal aliens. Now it's undocumented Democrats. This was about partisanship, and my amendment saying no citizenship laid naked the hypocrisy behind it, and it's how we defeated it. So what we've seen the last couple of days is the Washington establishment is panicking. They're panicking because conservatives are uniting behind our campaign, and they know that if that continues happening, this primary is over. So they're trying to muddy the water. They can't back away from Senator Rubio's longtime support for amnesty, so they're trying to suggest everybody else doesn't. Well, you know, in the last 48 hours, Senator Mike Lee has come out publicly and said, Ted is telling the truth, Marco is not telling the truth. Senator Jeff Sessions has come out publicly and said, Ted is telling the truth, Marco is not telling the truth. And Rush Limbaugh has come out publicly and said, Ted is telling the truth, Marco is not telling the truth. As John Adams famously said, facts are stubborn things. And I understand the political desire of other candidates to try to muddy the record, but the facts are simple. I oppose amnesty. I have always opposed amnesty, and I always will oppose amnesty, and I will note the other candidates on that stage are not willing to say that because that has not, is not, and will not be their position.
But Senator,
Right,
can I just
thank
quickly
you.
clarify, though?
Appreciate
Why
it.
didn't you tell us that for the last year? You only did it this week. Okay.
All right, so that was just a little press conference from Senator Ted Cruz. You can see here as politicians starting to take that Christmas break pretty soon. They just want to get those final press conferences in. And as we get them, of course, we will showcase that to you on Fox 10 News Now. Let's show you what we have in store as far as weather is concerned. Look at tomorrow and Sunday, 70 and 71. Gotta love it. I'm going to be laying out in that tomorrow. Absolutely, for sure. Probably about noon, 1 o'clock. Get a little tan going. Absolutely. People say, Mike, that's too cold. No, it's not. No, it's 70, and it's perfect. Then Christmas week, we start off with 63, and then on Christmas Day, 65, with partly sunny skies. You have to love living in Arizona at this time of year. And folks, it's just going to get... There are so many activities coming up after the new year. You figure we have the College Football Championship second week in January. Then at the end of January, we're going to have the Phoenix Open, or the Waste Management Open, whatever you want to call it. It's just going to be jam-packed with activities. I love this time of year, and then it just gets better and better. Then with spring training, and I think the weather is just absolutely gorgeous, perfect for spring training. Love it when baseball comes back to the Valley. And then it's just like right after that, it seems like it really, really starts to heat up. But I'm looking forward to that. That'll be all right because we've had a little bit of a colder winter. So I think people are really going to embrace the heat once it gets back to the 115s and 116s. They'll be crying about it, but at least it'll be a lot better than those cold nights that we've been having. I do want to show you a couple more things here before we fade to black in about 14 minutes here. So I just got a little to show you. Ben Carson, just a partial speech in Iowa from earlier today, guys.
And to dominate our lives. But then he said, before we turn into something else, the people of America would awaken and they would recognize what was going on and they would rise up and they would retake control of the government. And I say now is the time to do that. Thank you very much.
I'd like to reintroduce myself. I'm Candy Carson, and I approve this message.
Okay. Now, we have time for a couple of questions. You have a question? Thank you. These hands, he's got a these hand sign. Thank you. All right. Yes. Okay. Well, there is a lot of animosity, racial animosity. I think it has actually gotten worse in the last several years because, we have an administration and a Justice Department that emphasizes, the things that separate us rather than the things that bring us together. One of the things that I would be very interested in is introducing a program through the Justice Department that encourage local police departments to have beat cops once again. People who were known in the neighborhood. I was talking to a police officer in Baltimore recently, and he says he makes it a point to go back to the same neighborhood, to walk down those streets, to get to know those people. He says it's a great advantage for him because he says he never has to buy lunch or dinner. Everybody's always inviting him in. And I think a lot of resentment goes away when that happens. I think the other thing is, we have to recognize that in terms of the indigent in our society, it is our responsibility to take care of them. We are our brother's keeper. It's not the government's job. The government needs to read the Constitution. It doesn't say that they're supposed to be taking care of the people. Now, somebody might have misinterpreted the preamble where it says one of the responsibilities is to promote the general welfare. But that doesn't mean put everybody on welfare. That means create an environment where people can thrive. And that's the real key. Another question? Yes?
What will you do to change Obamacare? We've heard most of the Republicans say they'd like to abolish it, but how would you change our health care?
Well, the most important thing you have is your health and your health care. And that's why it needs to be in your own hands. And that's what I would do. Create a system where we put it back in the hands of the individuals and the healthcare providers by using something we call health empowerment accounts. It's like a health savings account, except there's no bureaucrats involved in it. You're the only one, and you can use it for health purposes. And we pay for it with the same dollars that we pay for traditional health care with. We spend twice as much per capita on health care as many other nations, and yet we have abominable access problems because of the amount of inefficiency and bureaucracy that's involved. With these health empowerment accounts, 80+% of your encounters are going to be between you and the healthcare provider. Nobody in between. That's going to eliminate the need for all the gamesmanship. Right now, prices are jacked up way beyond anything that they need to be because the insurance companies only pay a portion, so you jack it up so you can take into account that. All these games, they won't have to be played when the relationship is between the patient and the healthcare provider. Transparency comes. It brings things into a free market economy, and all of a sudden, you have both efficiency and cost control going on. You also make it possible for people to shift a certain amount of money in their empowerment account to other members of their family. So it gives you enormous flexibility. Every family becomes their own insurance company. It makes you care more about each other. If Uncle Joe is smoking like a chimney, everybody's going to hide his cigarettes. It makes a difference. And then the cost of your catastrophic insurance drops precipitously because the only thing coming out of that is catastrophic health care. How often do you have that? Not very often. And it accumulates. When you don't use it, it just keeps accumulating. From the day you're born, most children are not going to have catastrophic issues. They're not going to have anything major going on for the first few decades of their lives. Think how much money they will have accumulated by the time things do start going on. And then if they have the ability to shift it within the family, it gives you almost unlimited ability, plus you have your catastrophic insurance. Now, that'll take care of most people. The indigent, it doesn't take care of, but we have a way of taking care of them too, because we use Medicaid. Annual Medicaid budget, almost $500 billion. There are about 80 million people who participate, a little less than that. But you divide it out, it comes out to more than $5,000 for each person. What could you buy with that? Concierge practice, $2,000 to $3,000 a year. The boutique practice. You still have thousands left over for your catastrophic insurance. Those are the kinds of things that make sense. And they're not second-class citizens now. A large percentage of doctors won't even take Medicaid patients because it doesn't pay their costs. And they have staff they have to pay and stuff like that. Now, all of a sudden, they are just as valuable as everybody else. And you do a similar thing with Medicare. Give them much more in the way of choices, although I wouldn't force Medicare people into the program. But So people who wanted the traditional Medicare, they could still have it. But I guarantee you, when they saw the ones with our program, they said, how come you can go to any doctor you want? And how come you, and they would make a beeline over there. But that's the way it should be. The program should be so attractive, you don't have to force people into it, like with Obamacare. And Obamacare will just disappear because nobody in their right mind will want it. So. Last question. Yes, Common Core, I think, has lived its usefulness out. We don't need it anymore. What we need is good education. Education is the great divide in this country. And it was one of the things that Alexis de Tocqueville was so impressed with when he came here, trying to figure out how a fledgling nation barely 50 years old was competing.
All right, folks, and that was just the partial Ben Carson event that was happening a little bit earlier today in Iowa. Hope everyone is having just a fantastic Friday. What we're going to do is just shut down the stream for a little bit. Samia will be back at 2:30 to start up her show. So be on the lookout for that. We have no Kinsey today as she has started her beautiful vacation. I'll be back on at 4 o'clock, though, with hopefully a huge show. And we'll catch you up on all the latest headlines. And, of course, if anything does break, we are your source for breaking news coverage. You've seen it with San Bernardino. You've seen it with the Paris attacks. That's how we do it here. Fox 10 News Now. We'll be streaming. We'll be back streaming in about an hour, guys. Take care and go get some lunch.